saluting the flag. Pledge allegiance.
The flag,
Flag.
United
of the
States of
United States of
America,
America.
the
And to the
republic
republic for which it
which
stands.
stands,
one nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll just take a moment of meditation. Thank you.
Betsy's back. We're good.
All right. I will read the Sunshine Act. The mayor is not going to be in attendance today. In accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, public meetings may be held in person or by means of communication equipment to include streaming services and other online meeting platforms. Due to the COVID-19 situation, the Borough of Fairhaven's municipal facilities are closed to the public. This meeting is being presented through the Zoom meeting platform and being broadcast from Borough Hall at 748 River Road, Fairhaven, New Jersey. Public participation for this council meeting of May 10, 2021 is available by call-in phone number or through web conferencing. Members of the public will be on mute until public questions and comment time, which will be announced. At that time, the public will have the opportunity to question and comment by phone or through the Zoom platform by the raise hand button and will be called at the appropriate time. Notice of the meeting was included in the schedule of meetings, which was adopted by resolution number 2021-13 and sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Two River Times, the Hub, and the Star Ledger on January 7th, 2021, and posted on the Borough website, as well as the Borough board in the municipal building, and has remained continuously posted as required under the statute. With adequate notice having been given, the Borough Clerk is directed to include this statement in the minutes of the meeting. And with that, we will kick off the agenda for today. Oh, sorry, we have a roll call first.
Council members, Prisner Keith,
Here.
Hotch. You're on mute, but I see you. McHugh,
Here.
Neff,
here,
Rodriguez,
Here.
and Administrator Casagran, Attorney Cannon, Chief McGovern, Engineer Gardella, and all of our architectural professionals are on as well.
Perfect, thank you. The first agenda item is number 6, proclamation, Councilman Banahan. I'll read a proclamation honoring Councilman James Banahan. Whereas James Banahan served as councilman from June 9th, 2007 until December 31st, 2011, and was sworn in for another 3-year term on January 1st, 2019, serving until April 26th, 2021. And whereas he has been a vital part of the community as a member of the Borough Council and as a planning board member and zoning board member, and whereas very few people realize the tremendous imposition serving on council is to one's personal life, and whereas the Borough of Fairhaven staff and his fellow governing body members will miss the logic, wisdom, and invaluable experience Mr. James Banahan has contributed through his years of volunteer service. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Borough Council of the Borough of Fairhaven that it extends its deep appreciation and gratitude to James Banahan for his selfless service and wish him and his family many years of health and happiness. Anybody want to make a comment on the proclamation? With no comments, we shall move on to the presentation by our professionals and borough engineer for the police department and DPW facility presentation. There will not be a vote on this tonight. We will allow the public 3 minutes to make comments or ask questions. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. We will not be taking comments during the public comments on agenda items. For this presentation, we'd like to bundle that with the presentation here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eli. Who
You're
might
on
be?
mute, Eli. Eli, you're muted.
I think we can unmute him too. Oh,
That better?
Yep.
And you can see my screen, all right?
Mhm.
Okay, so thank you for asking us to present these projects tonight. We're going to talk about the proposed police building and the public works building. And with me tonight are Margaret DeSantis from my office, one of our
Hi,
designers,
everyone.
and Luke Butler from Frank H. Lair Associates. Luke.
Hey, how are you?
So I'm going to start by asking Luke to talk a little bit about the overall site development concepts, and we'll start by looking at a Google Earth image of this part of the borough of Fairhaven. Luke, take it away.
Thank you, Eli, and thank you, council, for having us tonight. Here we have an aerial image showing how relatively close the sites are to one another. So to the north, outlined in blue, we have the police department parcel located along 5th Street. And to the south, we have the DPW parcel surrounded by 3rd Street, Allen Street, and Maple Ave. And in between our sites, we have the community center fields. On the next slide. Next slide, we have overlaid our proposed projects onto the aerial image. So during our design work, we have considered the relationship between our sites and the park. And tonight we're going to explain how we thought about the park during our design.
All right, thank you, Luke. So first, we're going to talk about the police building, and I'll ask Luke to walk us through the site plan.
So we have a colored site plan for the proposed police department site. Shown in a light gray hatch is the proposed 2-story police building with a footprint of about 3,700 square feet. It's about 22 feet west of the existing PD, shown in a dashed line. Now, this is for construction phasing purposes, so the new PD can be constructed while the existing police remains in use. The proposed police department building has about a 30-foot front yard setback to match the character of the surrounding residential lots. In a dark gray hatch, we have our porous pavement parking lot, which contains 29 parking spaces, 2 of which are ADA accessible. To the southeast corner of our site is the proposed police storage garage with a 900 square foot footprint. Also located there are restrooms on the south side of it, which can be utilized by the public when they're at the park. And to the east of this structure is a generator serving the proposed police department building. On the west side of our site is an 8-foot wide proposed walkway. This provides a safe, accessible route to the community center fields located at the south end of the site. So unlike the existing site, pedestrians will not have to walk across the police parking lot in order to access the fields. Access to the front entrance of the building can be via stairs or sloped sidewalk. We also have proposed sidewalk along the frontage of the site along 5th Street. The site will be landscaped on the east, west, and south property lines. The building will have plantings around its perimeter. And it's important to note that there is a gradual change in grade on the site. So from 5th Street to the south end of the site, the grade changes about 4 feet. Maggie can tell you more about the building in the next slide.
Thank you, Luke. I'm going to ask Maggie to now walk us through the building itself.
Okay. Thanks, Luke. Okay, so here we're looking at the 4 building elevations for the police building. On the upper right-hand corner of the page, you can see the north elevation, and that's going to be the main entrance of the building. And then below it, you can see the south elevation, and that will face the ball fields. And then we have the west and east elevations. So On the bottom, the east elevation is going to face the parking lot. And you can see it also has the Sallyport garage. And on the west elevation, that's going to face the accessible route that Luke had just mentioned that reaches the ball fields. So due to some security reasons, we won't be showing the floor plans of this building, but we can talk a little bit about what's going on in the police building. The first floor, like I mentioned, has the main entrance, so that will be the public aspect of the building. And also the Sallyport garage will also be on the main floor and some other police functions. On the second floor of the building will be a training room and other police facilities. And on the basement level will be primarily storage and of course mechanical functions and such. The next slide, we have a proposed rendering of the building. So this is looking on Fisk Street to the entire site. So it's looking out at the front main elevation, which is the north side. Then you see a little bit of the east elevation, the parking lot, and then in the background, you can see the police storage facility off to the side, which kind of mimics the same vocabulary that you see on the main entrance of the building. We also want to note that we did keep in mind the surrounding neighborhood. So we kept that in mind when modifying the scale of the building and a lot of the architectural proportions.
Thank you, Maggie. All right, now we'll take a quick look at the Public Works building. Luke, do you want to start with the site plan?
Sure. So here's a colored site plan for the Public Works. In the center of the site, in a light gray hatch, is the proposed building with a footprint of about 6,600 square feet. This proposed building is about 50 feet north of the existing DPW building. So similar to the PD site, this is very beneficial as we'll be able to construct the new building while the existing Public Works remains in use. Immediately to the west of our proposed building is an outdoor recycling area, which will contain dumpsters where the public can safely enter and drop off cardboard. To the north of our building is the public parking lot. This contains 30 parking spaces, 2 of which are ADA accessible, 3 of which are designated for recycling with loading zones and unloading zones. And Eli, if you want to go back to that aerial image in the beginning. Here we just want to show the proximity of the visitor lot to the community center fields. So the public will be able to use this parking space while going to the fields. Now to the north of our visitor parking lot is a bioretention basin. This basin will be about 2 feet deep and will be designed to accommodate stormwater generated from the roof of the building, as well as sheet flow from our visitor parking lot. To the south of our Public Works building is the DPW yard itself. Now, due to the activity of the yard, it's important to provide maneuvering space. So we have a wide center aisle with perimeter parking for the trucks on the outside of it. And we provide circulation for access in the yard's various features. We have a fueling station along Allen Street. And in the southeast corner of the site, we have a salt storage shed. Access to the yard will be a one-way in off of Allen Street and a one-way out also onto Allen Street. Now we are also increasing the side yard buffers for the yard to 22 feet. So we have 22 feet on Allen Street and 22 feet on Maple Ave. The yard itself will be fenced. And as you can see here, we'll provide landscaping for buffering and screening. And that landscaping is shown even more in later slides.
Thank you, Luke. So I'll just take a moment to talk about the plan of the Public Works building. So from the north, there'll be a public entrance to the building itself. And then, as Luke mentioned, a public access to the recycling area. Here are the dumpsters. The garage itself will have 5 vehicle bays that are 50 feet deep from north to south. And then up front, we have offices, and we have a workshop, mechanical room, workroom for employees with a window for public service, and then a break room, training room in the northwest corner with an outside door so that when it's used for internal functions, it can be shared with the community for small community meetings. So that's pretty much the floor plan. Maggie, will you walk us through the elevations, please?
Okay, so the north elevation, that will be facing the parking lot. That's the main elevation of the building that that the public can enter. It faces the parking lot, and it also the elevation mimics a lot of the same vocabulary as the police building, which Eli will talk about later. The south elevation of the building is, the working side of the building that's going to house vehicles and going to be facing the yard. And the east elevation and west elevation, the west elevation faces the recycling center, and the east elevation will face the street. Okay, so this is at the intersection of Allen and 3rd Street, looking at the north elevation of the Public Works building. So you can see the public parking lot here with the driveway, and you can also see the recycling center enclosure, which will be screened with vegetation and planters. You could see the little driveway in the distance that will be separate, as Luke had mentioned, for the Public Works employees.
Maggie, talk a little bit about the scale and the arrangement of the Public Works building.
Sure. So this north elevation will be for the public functions. And then this upper portion, we needed certain height requirements, obviously, for the garages. So we wanted to try to keep the scale of the building and the height of the building as low as possible, keeping in mind the surrounding neighborhood, it being residential community. So the clear story level here, which you can see the windows, will bring sunlight into the garage space, and the lower roof here will be for the offices. So, the building only has that height where it actually needs it. The offices will be at a much lower roof height. Is that what you were getting at, Eli?
Yes, thank you, Maggie.
Okay.
So just to help everyone understand how these two buildings will relate, we put the north elevations, which is the front elevation of both buildings, the police building on the right, Public Works on the left, at the same scale, so that everyone can see very clearly that we're trying to use similar windows, similar pilasters, which will be covered in siding, to give both buildings a similar small residential scale. And we'll be using similar materials on both, including the siding, the windows, and the roofing materials, so that anyone in that neighborhood will understand that these are part of a family of buildings, family of public buildings that are sized appropriately to be in a residential neighborhood. So that is the end of our formal presentation. If there are any questions, I guess, Chris, you'll take them from the floor.
Yeah, what I'd like to do first, though, is just mention to the public who didn't happen to participate in the planning board capital review of either of these site plans or buildings. Each of these was handled in separate meetings. over the past, I want to say maybe 8 weeks. Want to thank the input from the public with their ideas, because I want to say many, if not all of them, have been folded into these designs and the site plan. Also want to thank the planning board. They wrote up very detailed and thoughtful concepts and themes that we're not only in support of, but to improve or consider for each of these site plans. That just gives a little bit of background, a little bit of history on how we arrived at this. We've been working on these for quite some time. And so I do want to turn to the public to participate, either comment, ask a question. If you've got more than 3 minutes worth of questions, that's fine. Please email the balance of those questions or comments. We've got a pretty big agenda tonight, so I just want to be respectful of the process here. And we'll turn to Allison if we've got, or maybe we can start.
If they raise their hand, Council President, we will recognize them if they use the raise hand feature.
I just saw a hand raised, actually. It was Councilwoman Christner Keefe. Do you have a comment or a question?
Yes, I have a brief question. If you could go back to slide 3, I think it was, of the presentation. Not that one. Let's see. It's maybe the next one, or I'm sorry, number 5. Let's see, that doesn't seem to be coming in clearly. Okay, there we go. The parking to the south side, is there a reason it is run adjacent to the bushes versus adjacent to the building?
I guess, Luke, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so this just makes it easier when you're turning around that corner, that you'll be able to swing into those spaces.
Okay. And then the walkway to the west side, what is the width of that?
That's 8 feet wide.
And was increased, is that right?
Right. And so a typical sidewalk is about 4 feet wide.
And I can't quite see it, the bathrooms on the back side of the storage area. What is, okay, I'm looking at, okay, I see now, it says possible future community center. And so those restrooms will be active and useful and accessible regardless of what happens with the space to the south of it?
Yes.
Okay, and how, have you figured out how they'll be entered? Is it from the side, from the, I'm sorry, from the east, west, from the south?
We're still studying that. They could either enter them from the south or they could enter from the east, one from east and one from the west.
Okay, and I know that the last time this plan was reviewed, I believe it was largely at the planning board meeting, the driveway wrapped around, which was I guess a preferred element to have, but it seems that you were comfortable eliminating it.
That's right.
Yeah,
The facility, Eli, let me tackle that one. The facilities committee decided that because there's so much ability to maneuver over the sidewalk in the front yard, that it was not a necessary element given the nature of our community and the use of this facility. So we were comfortable to take the direction, reorient the building. It makes it easier to actually get the building in. It's not as tight up against the old building. There were a number of factors that went into our decision making.
Okay. And the doorway on the west side of the building, what is that used for? An emergency exit?
These are emergency exits for the police. 2 exits from the staircases.
Okay. I believe those are all my questions. Thank you very much. This looks beautiful.
Thank you.
And I love the incorporation, or at least the proposed incorporation of globe lights on the front, similar to our current PD.
Thank you.
If I may ask just a quick question. I just wanted to first congratulate both the facilities committee and the architects. I think both plans are beautiful. And you really did a fantastic job incorporating many of the comments from both council and residents. And it really looks like it will flow really well relative to the residential neighborhoods that these two buildings will be part of. I was just curious, as you know, you have a bioretention pond in the DPW. How are you going to control runoff in the police station?
So the police station, we have a lot less impervious coverage. So we're going to be able to accommodate that with porous pavement in the parking lot here.
Can you touch on what porous pavement means? I'm not sure that everybody understands that. And then what the benefits are?
Sure. So typical pavement, stormwater hits it and immediately generates runoff. However, with a porous pavement, you still have a typical, it's a open graded layer of asphalt, maybe 4 inches thick, but then underneath it is about 2 feet of stone. And so water is able to flow into this pavement rather than run off of it. And then it's absorbed and controlled through this stone layer.
And is that enough to keep it from rushing down the street?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for
Luke, that-
clarifying that.
Luke, isn't that now one of the methods favored by the state?
Yeah, so the state has new stormwater regulations, which focus on decentralized green infrastructure. So porous pavement is an example of green infrastructure, as well as the bioretention basin we have proposed for the DPW. Thank
you. I just also wanted to mention, I'm really pleased that you designed the restrooms behind the police storage garage. That's certainly, you know, places to rest some of the concerns by residents to have a restroom available in that area. So I'm very, very happy to see that that has been incorporated.
I see we have do we have 2 hands?
Yes, if the governing body members are done asking questions, I will recognize Tina and ask her to unmute herself, and she can ask her question or make a comment.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you go to slide 9, I think it is?
This is Tina Iglesias.
Oh, no, this is Tina Brendel at 154 3rd Street. So my question or comment was with the parking lot. First, let me say you've done a great job in taking everybody's comments into account. And I know it's been a long process, but we thank you. The parking lot of the DPW, that's 2 entrances, one on Allen and one on Maple. Have you considered possibly either making those one way in, one way out, or having just one entrance? Because I don't know if you've ever been around on Saturdays or baseball weekends where this I guess western corner would be very congested with cars coming in and out. Like, just curious.
We
like
have
to-
looked at that. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, perhaps Mr. Gardella could talk a little bit about that.
Hi, good evening. We did consider that. The one question you had about eliminating one of the, I guess, entrances or exits, that would create a dead-end parking lot, which could be somewhat problematic. Obviously, having, you know, the ability to push it through from Allen to Maple or Maple to Allen is better for circulation, especially during the working day when people are coming in to drop off recycling, stop into DPW, because not only is the Public Works building going to be suited for DPW employees, it's also going to house some of the engineering functions. So, you know, we will have visitors coming vendors, the public, etc. From the weekend standpoint, obviously, this is going to be a huge benefit because it's going to take the cars off of 3rd Street and provide, well, there's 30 spaces, which include the 2 ADA and the 3 recycling. So you'll have 25 available. I think that the facilities committee looked at it. We talked about it at the planning board level. We obviously talked about it with our professionals that are on tonight. And we concluded that this was the best arrangement for this area, parking lot.
Okay, so does that mean there's not going to be street parking by the fields? Like on 3rd Street?
No, this is in addition to.
Okay. Okay.
It should alleviate some of the congestion on the street. That was really part of the reason why we try to locate the parking lots so close to the ball fields that people would prefer off-street parking rather than on-street parking. That was a big consideration for the facilities committee.
Okay. Is there any, could you further look at like say whichever one, it doesn't matter, but say you go in on the Allen Street and out on the Maple Avenue side, like so one way in, one way out type of thing. I just really am concerned. There is so much congestion. I know you're saying it's going to take it away from there, from 3rd Street, but with all the kids on their bikes and the cars backing out from the parking lot on 3rd Street, and at that intersection, like, well, the 3-way stop or whatever, or it's not even a 3-way stop. It's just, it just seems like a lot of added traffic. If it's all, like if they're going in and out both sides, I don't know. It's just something I think and would appreciate some consideration of.
When we thought through one ways, we're putting 100% of the traffic to one corner, which was less desirable than splitting it or alternating it where a car might go at one end versus the other. So it actually disperses the traffic rather than concentrating it at one end if it's a one way in, one way out. We had exhaustive conversations about that very topic. We thought that this might be the best solution.
Can I just ask, Rich, if we have it as 2-way and for some reason it appears that it's not panning out, is it possible to, in the future, change it to one way in and one way out?
Yes, we actually talked about that, I believe, at our facilities, that this is the design that we prefer. And if we have to make a change in the future, it's simply restriping those arrows.
Okay, so that option exists if it doesn't work quite as we anticipate.
Okay, so that's good. Is there going to be gates at either of the entrances, like to close the parking lot during off business hours, off park, game time, anything like that? So that people aren't driving over there and hanging out?
There are no gates proposed.
Okay, could someone possibly talk about it and consider it? And that's my last comment.
Thank you, Tina. We absolutely can consider that. The lot for DPW will be gated off because there's equipment in there and there are dangers in there that we don't need our kids or any young adults or any adults, frankly, getting involved in what's going on in the DPW yard. So yes, it's absolutely another consideration. We'd have to, we could fence it off as well, but we thought that less was more on the parking lot.
Okay.
But thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to recognize Will and ask him to unmute himself.
Good evening, Wilson Rodriguez, 18 Allen Street. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. first off, hats off to Chris and Mike on the council committee for the DPW and the police station. Rich as well from the DPW and the facilities committee for taking all the feedback from the residents and for over a year and so forth. I just have 3 questions or comments related to the site plan, which is the actual plan we're looking at right now, the slide here. Thank you for, I believe the driveway is being enlarged by 6 feet or so. And my question is, does the current design show which side is being enlarged? So is it being enlarged 3 feet by each side, or is the 6 feet just on one side? Specifically talking about the south entrance. Correct.
That's on that south entrance there. We added the 6 feet on the northern side of it.
Awesome. So my question here, or my concern, if you notice, as you move east from that entrance, as you go in, hats off to expanding the driveway, because the current driveway is short. And I live just across that driveway, and you'll notice sometimes the trucks have to do a K-turn just to get into the driveway. So yes, hats off for enlarging it. But my concern is as they enter, you'll notice the first parking spot, which I believe is for perhaps a truck or so, protrudes much more than the southern spot or the southern part of that driveway. So I don't know if that's kind of contradicting the efforts you're trying to make with widening the driveway. So my proposal was if maybe the southern part of that driveway can be flush exactly right there to that topmost protruding line of that parking spot, just so it doesn't counter or negate your efforts with that driveway. And also if there's any activity going on with that impound lot there, that might also impact the flow of traffic. I only mention it because you can see as the trucks go in and out, they get stuck, or if there's a car parked in the street or something going on, then it kind of impacts the vehicle traffic entering there. I don't know if that's something that could be considered, you know, with the I don't know how 6 feet shift of that southern part of the driveway to be kind of flush or parallel, if you will, with the northernmost part of the parking spot that's protruding there, if that makes sense.
Right. We can definitely look into that and consider that, as we don't want any issues with our circulation for the yard.
Awesome. The other so 2 more things I have. The salt storage shed. I don't know if it's possible to angle that on the corner, so this way it's not, you know, an eyesore for Allen Street residents. I know the current one is angled on the northeast portion of the lot. I don't know if that's possible, maybe swapping those 2 storage boxes that I believe are on the southeast corner, just south of the storage shed. If those can be swapped, and then the storage shed could be kind of the corner with a 45-degree angle, caddy corner, if you will.
We'll have to look into that. We just need to always consider trucks being able to access the shed and to be able to both put salt into it and take salt out of it.
No, exactly, 100%. If anything, putting it on a 45-degree angle, kind of, I guess you'll get more of a beam width, more of a space to work with than kind of that narrow frontage that you have just going right into it. Just a thought and a proposal. And the third thing, the last item.
Well, Wilson, just one thing. I think there will be a gate at the entrance that'll block the view of the salt storage facility. And the salt facility will be relatively low. It's not going to be 2 or 3 stories tall. It'll be relatively short compared to the main structure. So I think most of that will be obstructed. I just wanted to point that out. Luke, is that correct?
Right.
And the gate, I think, will be 8 feet tall. And so that should shield a vast majority, not from the second story of your home, but from the street level and from the first story.
No, thank you. Absolutely. At least from street level. But also, even if the gate's open, it could be an eyesore or something unpleasant to stare at, if at all possible, if it could be catty corner. And also it might even assist and contribute more to access. The third thing would be, I don't know if anywhere on here there's a proposal to put just kind of a general purpose garbage trash bin for the DPW. I know sometimes there are multiple gray garbage cans lined up on outside of Allen Street for all types of miscellaneous trash, etc., that comes from either the recycling area or DPW trash, etc. If that's something that can be considered anywhere on here, a multi-purpose bin or etc. for DPW use.
Yeah, we have storage bins shown actually right by the salt storage shed. And we also provide storage both inside the building and outside of it in the recycling area.
I'm sorry, not storage. This would be like trash removal. On Allen Street, particularly on trash days, you'll see upwards of 6 garbage cans out there. I don't know if there's a way to minimize that, and instead of having 6 garbage cans, maybe there can be a trash pull from a dumpster, if you will, a small dumpster on the lot.
That would be tied more to our trash contract, which we'd have to take a look at when it comes up for rebidding.
Can I cut in real quick? Will, I think thank you for your questions. I think that's a good idea. I think from recycling, failure to remove styrofoam and stuff like that, I've seen upwards of over 10 cans lined up. Rich, maybe we could look into do something like a simple flat curb or some sort of landing pad, like a curb cut in or something like that, just to try and, we're freeing up so much space on this street. Just thinking, being good neighbors and trying to keep the street as clear as possible. It could be like an afterthought after design, some sort of just maybe flat curb where we can tuck the trash cans in a little bit. You think something like that would be possible?
Yeah, we could look at that with the design engineers.
Sure. All right. Thanks again, Will, for your questions.
Also,
No, thanks, Mike.
Say something about the salt shed. The salt shed needs a very tall door in order to load and unload the salt. So while it will be shorter than the main building, it's going to be more than 1 story high. Just want people to know that.
If I may just comment on with regards to that, I've passed by the DPW and I've seen the gates open. So I guess even if you're gonna have a 6-foot tall gate, I guess my question would be, would that gate always be closed?
Yeah,
That's
the
general
idea,
policy, or otherwise, maybe we should consider the possibility, if feasible, to move the salt storage a little bit hidden from that view.
the idea on the gates is to have them open and close when the vehicles are entering and exiting. Right now, we leave the gates open because the public comes in, vendors come in, and the parking lot that we've put near the ball fields, but for the public and for vendors, is now accessible and will not be gated. At least that's the plan right now. And those gates will always be closed. It serves to enclose the facility for aesthetic purposes, but also for safety purposes. So I don't think we have, do we have any other questions? I think.
I don't see any more hands for the public. Oh, one, let's see, we just had the couple go up. Want to recognize Liz McNeil? Liz, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, I can. Hey.
Hi, Liz. Do you want
hi.
to just put your address, name, address?
Oh, sure. 193rd Street, Liz McNeil.
Thanks.
Could you take a look at I think it's maybe slide 5. Yeah, it is. It's slide 5. Could you move in so we could see the storage, the police storage and the restrooms? I'm just curious to know what that, oh, that's the generator. So I have a couple questions. The first one is there were some comments from the public last time about there being a wall that I guess they're playing racquetball or practicing tennis right there. Is that going to be replaced?
Well, the wall is directly below the 22.1 on the, it's still there.
Okay.
Depending on how
Oh,
we,
I see.
in the future, how the rec committee decides and how we come back with any kind of structure that might be appended or replaced in this area is, you know, like that will potentially have a recreational wall included, but that wall will still be there.
Okay.
So we did inspect it. There's some structural damage to it right now, but you know, it's not anything that we're worried about having to take it down just at the moment.
Okay, and then actually I just noticed it says shed in gray. Are those existing sheds? Right under 22.1?
Oh yeah, there's sheds outside of the back side of the community center, yes.
Okay, so are those going to be taken out?
Those will be replaced by the storage, the police
Gotcha,
storage.
okay. Okay, and then this possible future community center. So possible meeting, is there a definite plan in place to discuss it? I'm just wondering why that's there, unless there's some definite plans, and also kind of tied with that, what is actually going to be there? Is that going to be like open concrete area? It just seems like a lot of space to just sort of leave vacant without a plan.
It's currently exactly as you said, it's currently paved. We approached the rec committee. I made a presentation and took questions and answers. Probably it might have been the last rec committee. You know, asking the folks on the committee, serving on the committee, to conceive of what they think the community will want for the next 20 years. We haven't bonded for any community center. So in the future, whatever we do put there, we'll have to figure out how to finance it. But we did not want to rush it, nor did we, but we wanted to give people an idea what could happen by just simply sketching it out. The size of that rectangle there is roughly the size of the current community center useful floor area. And then with those bathrooms, that the community center currently has bathrooms. So to the extent that we can help people visualize what's going there or have some idea what the scale might look like next to the basketball courts, that's the purpose of that.
Yeah. How and how tall is the police storage garage and the restrooms? How tall is that building?
Let me just pull it in here. It's basically just a
Oh, I
one-story.
see. Okay, yeah, I see. And then last question, which is sort of part two of the public space use, you know, community center question. What is happening with Bicentennial Hall as far as making that more open and available?
It's later on in the agenda.
Okay.
Yep, in the consent agenda number, I've lost track of it. It's in here somewhere though. Number 138, we have a memo for requirements and architecture for that building to bring it up to speed.
Okay. Does that include a parking area? Is that what bring it up to speed means?
It's mostly for the, is it a site plan, Eli, inclusive of the building, or is it mostly for the building?
Chris, Rich Gardell is doing the site work on that project.
Okay.
It's mostly parking, some ADA parking, an ADA ramp, and then Eli's proposal, which is on tonight's agenda, is for the internal bathroom and the ADA requirements for the internal structure that we're going to look to submit a community block grant in July to see if we can get some funding from the county.
So it sounds like it's both.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Super.
Okay, I'm gonna recognize Tracy Cole and ask her to unmute herself, please.
Good evening. Hi, Tracy Cole, 123 Grange Ave. I was wondering if Mr. Goldstein could please, or Maggie, I'm not sure who is the right representative to ask, but could someone walk us through slide number, I believe it's 5. Yeah, the one we're on, the police department. Could you walk us through your thinking on the facade? Sorry, the rendering you were on prior to the elevation, that one.
Maggie?
Hi.
Hi.
So your question pertains to the north elevation facade?
Right. Yes, correct.
Okay, so this is going to be the main entrance of the building. So we definitely wanted to give it a more prominent character than the east or west. It has a, windows on either side, windows on the second floor where it makes sense to have them, where it be trading rooms or offices. And the building is surrounded by a stone base to kind of give it the, a nicer facade that will blend in with a lot of the surrounding buildings. As far as the materials go, the material is like, similar to a hardy board siding, which I think you would see a lot of in your neighborhood. And then the second floor, the roof line has gables on either end and a central gable and a pediment, which is kind of characteristic of a more government building with that kind of character with a few other homes in your area.
I can sort of pick up on this, the government sort of nod to colonial revival, this whole thing. Where I got a little lost is in the use of the siding in the vertical elements. I don't want to take it apart too much. I can see generally how the forms are put together, and I appreciate the consideration of the neighborhood, and I could see all that. So you have siding on the vertical elements, particularly the 4 in the front, which would roughly take the place of a colonnade on a more colonial revival structure. Did you consider other materials for those 4 vertical elements?
Sure. So these are 4 pilasters that we've added as an element to try to, support the pediment. And, I think Eli and I will explore other options. Eli, do you have anything to add to that as far as the materials? I'm not sure if we've reached that stage.
Oh, I think that we certainly can look at some other materials, but I think we also didn't want to make the building look too self-important in this building.
I can appreciate that. I can see you're walking a fine line.
Yes, we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. We don't want to we want it to look a little more formal than a house, but not so formal that it emphasizes the fact that it's in a residential, it's a public building.
Yes, I so appreciate the needle you're trying to thread, and I think slightly officious is appropriate. And I'll just leave my comment at that and say there seems to be maybe a little wiggle room left in perfecting that facade a bit.
Right, well, thank you for your
But
comment.
very nice job, and thank you very much, and thank you to the facilities committee. And I know you've received a lot of public input, and I think that's part of your job, and you've done a great job. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I recognize House 87 and ask her to unmute herself.
Ruth, this doesn't count against your 3 minutes, by the way, no matter how long it takes. She's back on mute again. She's teasing me.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. These buildings, since they're financed by the residents, belong to the residents, and I think they should be utilized to the absolute capacity. And you've got that room, the meeting room in the police department upstairs that could also serve as a meeting room for the seniors instead of building an entire community center in the back. Also for the garden club or whatever, because these meetings only take place a couple hours a day, once a month. I just think we can use every available space as much as possible.
Thank you.
Okay.
Much appreciated. Do we have
I
any
don't see any
other?
other hands raised at this time.
Could I say something, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. I just want to respond to the question about the rec committee and their response to a community center. Chris, you attended our meeting in April and you presented some ideas as well as listened to the concerns of the members of the committee. I think they're all in agreement that a community center would be a great idea, but they haven't really gone beyond that, beyond agreeing that it's something that we should pursue. And I would also like to thank you and your committee for listening to all of the concerns of the residents, as well as incorporating their ideas and suggestions into your plans. So thank you.
I sincerely appreciate that, Councilwoman Koch. I think that's the way we get the best result for the town. So I really appreciate the feedback.
Agreed.
And I guess with no further, I'm just sort of stalling a little bit, tap dancing. I guess there's no more comments. Let's move on to the workshop session. I want to thank Eli and the whole gang for participating. It's not over, it's just the beginning. But thank you for the presentation, and I think we're all set. We can set you free for the night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And so the workshop session, council member vacancy. I had read a proclamation earlier that Councilman Banahan is stepping down. In the absence of the mayor, sorry, Ruth's got her hand up again. I think we'll tackle that during public comment on the agenda items. With the absence of the mayor, we will put off presentations. The candidates to replace Councilman Banahan were notified earlier today, and we will tackle that in our next meeting. But in the council package, we received resumes and biographies of the folks, and they all look qualified and look like fine candidates. So we'll tackle that next week. The next item is the request from the Monmouth Daycare Center to post lawn signs from May 11th to June 10th. This is normal course to request this of the council. It's up to the council to grant this. It's for an event. After the event, the signs will be removed, and it looks like it's roughly 4 weeks of signage. Do we have any questions on that? Anybody want a briefing on that? Want to just move on and show your support?
It's going to be 25 signs, most of them on residential property.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Fine. Yep, thank you.
So I just want to poll everybody, or if everyone's in favor, if you say aye, we can move on with that. Aye.
Aye.
Great.
They're up already, so.
Oh, they're up already? I didn't even realize that. Someone
It'd be
would
for a
have,
good cause.
Ben would have made the, if he were here, he would have made the comment that Fairhaven is the land of lawn signs. So I'm not going to go there, but I'm going to give Ben a little nod there.
Nice.
McCarter Pond treatment for 2021. There's a memo from the Environmental Commission. I'm just going to brief on this very quickly, and then I'm going to ask Councilwoman Neff to make a comment. Annually, we try to do our best to keep the pond scum to a minimum. Some years we're very successful. Some years we're dreadfully unsuccessful. And it really depends on the weather and environmental conditions. It all boils down to oxygen and duckweed and different aeration techniques in the ponds, both Schwanker's Pond and McCarter Pond. So this year, the Environmental Committee is recommending that we take steps to remediate the growth in the ponds using biochemicals that we've used in the past and pumps. Let me turn it over to Councilwoman Neff. She was participant to the recommendation and the memo.
Okay, so maybe I'll provide a little background. I think the issue in McCarter Pond has been going over a decade in terms of members of the Environmental Commission working on solutions and trying to propose solutions. Part of the problem is that some of the cost is prohibitive, depending on what solutions we're looking for. It's extremely expensive. We're dealing with a very shallow pond. McCarter Pond has always been a very shallow pond, and over time it's filled more and more. And with the shallow characteristic of the pond, more and more vegetation is growing, and then it dies every year, and then goes down to the bottom, and essentially creates more sediment. So it's getting, shallower and shallower, and more and more difficult to manage. The view of the Environmental Commission is that the solutions that we've been using so far, which are a low level of aeration being used, as well as environmentally friendly chemicals to control the algae at the pond, have not been successful. I think for the most part, the view of the Environmental Commission is that it might have helped a little bit, but not really a lot. And if we keep spending the money annually to do this, let's just say we're spending, and Teresa knows the numbers better than I do, but let's just say for now that we're spending $2,500 or $5,000 on this a year, multiply that over 5-10 years, we're not getting a lot of great results. And at the end of the day, over a 5-10 year period of time, we're spending a meaningful amount of money trying to deal with the issue. What they're saying, what the view of the commission is, that we should move to really try to tackle the problem with McCarter Pond through hydro raking. And hydro raking would be a process in which we would essentially scoop out the top layer, the vegetation, and that's all that stuff in the first 1 foot layer of the pond, and remove those spoils essentially out of the pond. And there are a couple options on what to do with that. One would be to truck them out in wet form, because it's going to be all wet when it comes out. That would be very expensive to truck them out, to truck those spoils out. The second option would be to dry that out, let it dry out, and truck it away dried. And the third solution, which is the one that they are proposing, is that we let those vegetation materials dry out, we shred them, and make it available for the natural fields area, such that it can be used as the base for existing or new trails. So essentially, just essentially sending over to natural fields. I think the view of the commission is that would be the most cost-effective solution. It's a way to reuse that material, which is mostly, vegetation, dead vegetation. And in addition to that, they also believe that we will need to have a higher level of aeration to, once we've cleaned that out, to maintain the water clean through a couple fountains being installed. That's not so expensive. And then hopefully, be able to maintain that better condition of the water at the pond. So that's sort of the combined proposal. It's essentially the hydro raking, and after that's done, the aeration. Because of costs and so on, the commission is suggesting that the council hire an expert, that we get a consultant to help us out, so that we make sure that, this is the right proposal, that we are able to get the proper bids and understand what the costs would be and make sure that these are manageable costs. But this proposal is looking at, is meant to be more cost effective and not as cost prohibitive as some other options that had been looked at in the past, such as dredging the pond and so on. As a member of the finance committee, I would just mention that I think first of all, I believe we need to take a look at this seriously, because McCarter Pond is in really bad shape. And this has been passed along for years. I mean, it's over a decade that this has been sort of in this condition. And because of the cost, it has not been fully addressed. I think we should look at it seriously as a council. But I do want to point out there are a lot of other things in the pipeline. Schwenker's Pond has some issues as well. I think it's the view of the Environmental Commission that if we hire a consultant, we should also ask about Schwenker's Pond, because it's a deeper pond, or we believe it's deeper at this point. It's possible that we may be able to just do fountains as a higher level of aeration and not do hydro raking there, which is the most expensive piece. And the other thing I would mention is that the Shade Tree Commission is looking at possibly a proposal to replace the Quonset cherry trees on Fairhaven Road over a period of years, because they might be reaching the end of their life, and finding a way to replace those trees in a way that we are able to maintain the beauty of that corner of Fairhaven Road with Ridge. So I just wanted to say that, I'll mention that later in the Finance Committee report, but it's very important that we start looking at these things over a 3 to 5 year period of time, because there's a lot of expenses and a lot of things we need to address. I don't believe we can tackle all this at the same time, and I need to prioritize.
Thank you, Councilwoman Neff.
I have a couple of questions on that, if I may.
Sure, please.
Thank you, Council President. Councilwoman Neff, do you know if the hydro raking were to take place, how long does that impact last for McCarter Pond? Do we know?
You meaning once it's done, how long the water would remain clean?
How long would it be until we encountered this problem again?
I think it depends on how well we maintain the water. I think one of the things that was discussed in the Environmental Commission is that if you do nothing afterwards, it will fill up again, and that that stuff will come back in maybe 4 or 5 years. You would need a effective way of aeration, of maintaining that water clean. That's why they're saying it needs to be a combined approach, which is essentially to do the hydro raking and then do the proposed high level of aeration through the use of, they're proposing 2 fountains. There is Bramston currently has a pond that has fountains. It's supposedly quite pretty. So it's something that would be visually pleasing, but more than anything else, it would help aerate and not the water enough to hopefully push that as far out as possible in terms of maintaining the water quality. But if we don't do that second step, which is actually a lot less expensive, but the real issue is the hydro raking. But if we don't do that second step, we might be in the same place in 5 years.
Sure. And then my second question, just more broadly, I know that and I cannot recall specifically the timing of it, that a grant was applied for with regard to the adding stone dust trail along Ridge and Fairhaven Road. Do we have any response on that grant application?
Yeah, that was last year's Monmouth County Open Space, and we did not receive that grant.
Okay, right. So that is the connection piece related to, I think it's point 3C regarding placing the dried vegetation underneath, new trails in the natural area.
Yeah, I think even if we don't, we did not get the grant to do those trails or any new trails. But I it's available material that could be used even for existing trails to shore up the base of it. So if nothing else, at least to me, logically makes sense to try to reuse it in the natural area, either for existing trails or a new one. And there, there is still a desire to look into a trail along those Quonset cherry trees along Fairhaven Road. So,
Sure.
I don't think that's been resolved, but, just keeping that in mind, it would seem to me like we might really we would need the input from the natural area Councilwoman Keefe, I know you were a part of that committee. We would need that input and make sure that we work together and that you are in agreement that that would be a feasible solution. But just to keep in mind, if we decide not to do that and truck it out instead, the cost might be actually too high to get it out. We might actually turn it into a completely different project if we don't find a way to use it within our town.
Right, that makes sense. Certainly, as the liaison, I can certainly bring that to the natural area and provide yourself, the committee, and the governing body with an update in that regard, and any concerns that they might have about proceeding in that fashion, or what their recommendation might be. Thank you.
Councilwoman Koch.
Yes, I know in prior years, councils have explored hydro raking. And Councilwoman Neff, you explained very clearly what some of the options were once that hydro raking material was collected. One idea that a previous council explored was taking the spoils of the hydro raking and drying them out in the natural area in the corner by Ridge and Fairhaven Road, where there's kind of an open field there. If you chose the third option, which you said was the least expensive option, which is us not trucking the materials out, but actually drying them out and reusing them as part of our walking trails, where would you propose doing that drying process? And what are there odors associated with it? Is it, what's the length of time that you would suggest it might take?
I think that it was not clear in the discussions in the commission, environmental commission, exactly where they should be dried. I mean, one possibility could be right by the park right there. Another one would be the natural area. We would have to think about where that could be done. I don't think that has been finalized. With the issue of the odors, it's possible that could happen. And I think the view was that maybe we should do that in the winter time when people have all their windows closed. But I think we need to explore that issue a little bit better. That's not 100% clear. And back to the idea that perhaps we should get a consultant just to make sure that we are comfortable with anything we're doing, and including consideration for how we should do that.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the council?
I'll just chime in with a couple comments. The property line, one of the proposed preventative maintenance was a barrier, perimeter vegetative buffer strip. This would prevent the nutrients and settlement from coming back into McCarter Pond. The residents, is their property line right at the watermark, or is there some sort of borough easement? Like, is that a feasible option? Does anyone know?
Maybe Teresa would know that.
I'll let Rich jump in here, but there are a couple areas there where the borough has an easement access on a couple of lots, but actually right on residential property, they are private bulkheads. So their bulkhead, is owned by the owner. So Rich I know off of Buttonwood, there's a couple of access areas that is borough property.
Yeah, there is. It is minimal though. When you look at the overall shoreline, length of the shoreline, for the most part, it is private.
Maybe one other thing I should mention is that although this process of sedimentation of McCarter Pond is natural, nutrient overload and runoff, from fertilizers in lawns definitely has an impact on the quality of the water and the algae, growing and so on. So I think that one of the things that was discussed is that, if we do this, we should make sure our residents that we publicize it, that it's well known in our town that this is what we're doing. That's how we improve in McCarter Pond. It's such a beautiful pond. We really want it to look great and be used by our residents, but maybe, becoming a little bit more environmentally conscious about the use of fertilizers and so on, and reducing the nutrient load, in runoff going into that pond, is actually pretty important. And it depends on all the residents that live close to the pond.
Yeah, and if I could just, for some context, in my past experience on the environmental committee, some requests, I don't know if we would even call them bids, had went out back in 2019, without mentioning any of the companies. To give you an example, the one bid, hydro raking, would be about, of the total bid, $66,840. Hydro raking is about $38,000. Crane, excavator, aeration, miscellaneous. The disposal fees, this would be additional expenses, are about $58,000. So we're talking, the disposal of this material is very expensive. So looking into one of these bids, for example, suggests that there's like a steel, I imagine a big trash can looking thing where they could truck it, put it in this, and it's all open, dry it out, and that would bring down the disposal fees because the weight would come down, obviously. But I think a huge hurdle of the hydro raking is the disposal. So if we could take care of this in-house and coordinate with the Natural Area Committee and find a home for this, I think going forward with just the hydro raking seems like a really good idea, because trying to do the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is not very conducive. So there's some hard numbers for you guys. We'll talk about the disposal fees. $58,000. We're talking almost double what it costs to just do the job.
And just looking at the recommendation, just to tie out on something Councilman McHugh was just saying, the recommendation is to proceed with the bio treatment this year, but also look at 3C in the packet, which is grinding up their vegetation and moving it somewhere under the trails or somewhere in the natural areas. So I think we're, and then also high level aeration as opposed to low level aeration. Those are all things we should be considering based on the recommendation from the committee. We don't have to take action on it tonight. I don't believe, is that right, Rich?
That's correct,
Okay.
Council President. I will just issue a purchase order as needed for the chemical treatment this year, as we have in the past.
And then we'll continue the discussion with the Natural Area Committee as it unfolds, and hopefully, we can come to some kind of mutual agreement on mutually beneficial agreement on this topic.
And I did hear back from bond counsel late this afternoon regarding the ability to bond for the hydro raking. And obviously, if the governing body decides to move forward in that direction, in our next bond issue, we would include money for soft costs to cover the consulting engineer that the Councilwoman Neff and the Environmental Commission had recommended that we have look at that. And we do, we used a consulting engineer in the past, and we do have a report that I provided the governing body that they could, use as a base and then move on from there.
Excellent. Thank you for the bond update for financing. So do we have any other questions here on this topic? And if not, we'll move on. Secretary assignments to boards and commissions. I'm going to turn this over to Teresa for
Very brief, with the support of the Personnel Committee and the governing body at large, we had made the decision that it was in the best interest of serving our boards, actually our commissions, our Shade Tree Commission, our Historic Preservation Commission, and our Environmental Commission. We have assigned a in-house borough employee to assist them in the secretarial and interfacing functions with the borough. Sandy Papa is going to, who's the Planning and Zoning Secretary, is going to be the secretary to the Historic Preservation Commission, and our Environmental Commission, and our environmental, and who else do we give one to? Shade Tree Commission is going to be Christy Larson, who was recently also hired. I did make the assignment end of last week with the blessing of the Personnel Committee, and I will tell you that it was very well received by the chairpersons. With all of the, electronic postings and the Zoom and the minutes and the agendas and all of what we're doing, it was really a lot to ask of our volunteers to continue to hold that up. So it'll work very smoothly. So I'm very pleased to announce that.
Excellent. Any questions on that?
I just want to say that's great. I think that it's extremely helpful to have that kind of more formal and professional help to the commissions, and it's difficult to be a secretary. It takes minutes and post them. I've done that before for the Environmental Commission, and it's not an easy task.
Same.
It's hard.
No, that's great. I totally agree with you. Been there. So we can move to the public comment on agenda items. Please state your name and your address, and please keep your comments or questions to 3 minutes. And with that, let's open it up.
I'm gonna recognize Ruth again. Ruth, if you unmute yourself, you can speak again.
I just did that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had my hand up on when you were discussing McCarter's Pond and Schwenker's Pond, and Councilman McHugh answered one of my questions, or at least asked one of them, and Councilwoman Neff Koch asked another one. But I'd like to go back and say that the bubblers that you've got in McCarter's Pond now, would they be sufficient to handle fountain type of aerators, or would the piping have to be redone? Have you questioned Rumson as to how much their fountain one is at Pomfrey's Pond there on East River Road?
I don't know about the plumbing in detail, Ruth, but my understanding is that those fountains don't cost a lot. It's
Okay.
a few $1,000s. It's not a very meaningful cost. But I don't know the details of the plumbing. I cannot answer that.
Okay. I think although McCarter Pond is lovely and the residents enjoy it, and you have your fishing derby and things like that, that Schwenker's Pond is a much bigger, uglier problem seen by a lot more people than the people who live in Fairhaven. And on a really hot, bad summer, it looks like lime green chiffon jello. I mean, it just is awful. The problem there is because of the county road, River Road, being there over it and it emptying into Shippey's Pond, which is owned privately. So would a fountain be feasible in Schwenker's Pond?
Yes, that was what was discussed in the Environmental Commission with regards to Schwenker's Pond. First of all, I actually been looking at my notes, and according to the Environmental Commission, and that's just one quote, so don't hold me to that, but I think it was mentioned in the Environmental Commission that one pump might cost something like $2,800. So it's not a lot for each one of the pumps for the fountains.
Okay.
But to answer your question on Schwenker's Pond, the initial view of the Environmental Commission is that hydro raking would not be a good idea there because it would be very hard to get there. There's private property around it, and the access to Schwenker's Pond would be a lot more difficult and possibly make it a much more expensive project. Perhaps the upside would be that because Schwenker's Pond may be deeper still, and the commission felt that we should get the consultant, if we hired one, to see how deep it is in the different locations, that we might be able to just go with the fountain option and install 2 fountains at Schwenker's Pond if there's enough depth to install the fountains, because it needs to be completely submerged. And that would be a relatively low cost option for Schwenker's Pond. It would be visually pleasing, but it would achieve the job, hopefully achieve the job of providing enough aeration and improving the water there. So that's, that's something that was considered, and it needs more research. But there are some reasons as to why we might want to have a different tackle on
Okay.
Schwenker's Pond.
Well, Schwenker's Pond is it has a different water flow. It has water coming from a distance and flowing through, where I think McCarty's Pond is pretty much stagnant, as it were. What you see is what you've got at McCarty's Pond. And its basic feeder is rain.
Right.
Where Schwenker's Pond has a moving, some coming down from Park Road and like that, and then going into Shippey. So it is a moving body of water. I think the fountains would be absolutely lovely, because as I say, hundreds and hundreds of people go down River Road and go across that bridge and see Schwenker's Pond in the summer. Change of subject. The next subject is the removal of brush and leaves. I understand that some residents in Fairhaven have gotten warnings. I don't know if warnings is the proper terminology, but I think we have 3 or 4 options here. When they put their brush and leaves out of schedule, you contact the owner and have them, if they have a landscape, contact their landscaper. If the landscaper refuses to adhere to the schedule, you can, number one, yank their permit.
Ruth, is this on the agenda?
No, I thought you were doing public.
No, this is agenda items.
This is
Oh, I'm
agenda.
sorry. Chris said public.
I said,
Okay.
no,
All
no.
right. Okay. All right. I'll buzz in later.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna recognize Chris Hempstead and ask him to unmute himself.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Hey, Chris.
Excellent. Hi, good evening, everyone. With respect to
Chris, name, address.
Oh, sorry, Chris Hempstead, 53 Willow Street, Fairhaven.
Thank you.
With respect to 2021
129 and 130.
129 and 130, you got it. Thank you. I wanted to just, remind before there's, council action, potential action taken, a little bit of correspondence that's happened over the last year, and with respect to the the available options that are before, or could have been before the Board of Ed. Back on November 10th, not to repeat all of them, but just like some of the pertinent ones, it was made clear by the administrator that Sean McNeil, the superintendent of the Board of Ed, has shared or will share the information with his professionals and consult with Rich Gardella, but that the school had a copy of the borough's survey, which delineated the roadway, and then, this is important, all available right of way. Now, what's important about that is that the proposal that was later reviewed, which I don't even know if anyone had seen it, by the engineers, which was acknowledged back in February 16th, that is from Sean McNeil, where he met with the borough leadership. I'm not sure who that was, doesn't say, to review the schematic, which is something that was created by their professionals. And unfortunately, it was too invasive to the park to consider moving forward with. So I guess one of the questions I would hope that the council would ask of the professionals tonight, and what was that all available right of way that was made to the Board of Ed? Specifically, and I think, sometimes, some of us know what this is, but I'm particularly interested in the 20-foot easement that's on the McCarter Park deed or survey, which goes into the park, which from what I understand can be used for park use, which includes parking. So with that 20 feet, which is currently not being used, we would be within our rights as a borough. I know Teresa probably knows a lot more about this, but I've spoken with our state representative as well. So my ask of the council is when these items come up, if there's an opportunity to ask questions of the Board of Ed and their professionals, that you take into consideration some of those items. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm gonna recognize Tom Bull and ask him to please unmute himself.
Good evening, Tom Bull, 107 Maple Avenue. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of tonight's meeting and my opportunity to talk about the DPW building project. I have to say, in everything that I've seen, it looks fantastic. I'm very happy with really anything that can go on over there. I've been living here almost 30 years and have been anxiously waiting for something to change over there. And I'm really, I'm happy with the way things look. I only have one concern or comment, and it has to do with the sidewalks. I know that the drawings were talking about putting sidewalks on the house side of Maple Avenue where all the residences are. And there's just a couple of concerns that I have. That number one, I've been actually working from home a lot, and I look out my front window and I see, I'm sure there's over 100 people walking their dogs and just people going back and forth to Meadowflower and wherever they're going back and forth to Knollwood. That they're always on the other side of the street. They're never on my side of the street. And I'm not sure they're ever going to go on my side of the street if the opportunity is to be on a side where there's nothing. Where, it's basically just trees and grass. And I think that if we have to make or create 6 aprons, because I believe there's 6 residences that are affected. If we have to create 6 aprons and cut off build those things to be able to incorporate the sidewalk to complete it all the way down, I think it would be far less expensive to put the sidewalk on the other side of the street. It's a nice straight shot, nothing really in its way, maybe a tree or 2 or 5, I don't know. But certainly the cost would be less. And from, I'd rather see the cost savings be used to give me more trees to hide the building. The other thing is I'm not 100% certain if anything has to change with the water and where it's currently positioned, and if they have to make that change, if it involves a much more involved process or cost. And then finally, there's several of us, I think probably 4 of us, that have paid independently to pave the front of our house and take up our own property so that we can park cars and not have to worry about that overnight parking, that winter overnight parking thing, that we're going to lose that now. All that said, I knew what I was getting into when I moved across the street from the DPW, and I'm not going to cry at this point. I just wanted to perhaps suggest that I think when you look from a helicopter down to the site of where the DPW is going with the parking lot and the new building and everything, that running the sidewalk on that side of the street seems more complete to me. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Much appreciated. We'll take that back.
I've got either Carolyn or Paul Ferguson, asking them to please unmute.
Hi, it's Carolyn Ferguson, 7 Colonial Court. I'm the chair of the Natural Area Advisory Committee. So I'd like to just, ask a question or two about the hydro raking proposal. Certainly we support the idea of a professional advising us, and we'll appreciate that. One thing I'd like to suggest is that it seems like we've always only considered one possible place to put these spoils. Like the town does own other open areas and wooded lots and stuff. So I'd like to suggest that we have an alternate place or two considered, so that it's not just a given as to where it's going to go, but that we make the best choice out of multiple options. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Neff, did the environmental committee already consider some of that?
I don't think we
Okay,
had a firm view on location.
okay, great. Carolyn, thank you for the comments. We will absolutely take that back.
I don't see any other hands, Council President.
Okay, we'll close public comment on agenda items and move to approval of minutes. Can I have a motion for regular and executive session minutes for
So
April 26th?
So moved.
Second.
And I need to abstain from executive session. But I was participant for the regular meeting. And shall we do a roll call?
Council members Christner Keefe,
Yes.
Koch,
Yes.
McHugh.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Rodriguez for regular.
Yes. Thank you. No old business, new business. Councilwoman Neff, would you like to represent finance, please?
Sure. Maybe I'll have Teresa. Teresa, would you like to just give a couple comments on the budget? Are we introducing it today?
Yes, the budget is on for introduction tonight. It was gone over in the last meeting during workshop session. Nothing has changed from the presentation at the workshop 2 weeks ago to the budget that's before you tonight to be introduced. The budget is scheduled to be advertised. First of all, there isn't a resolution on to read the budget by title. That's a standard state resolution we adopt every year. It enables us not to read the budget line by line by line. In order to do so, we do have copies available for the public at their request and at multiple locations. As far as the budget itself goes, right now we plan to advertise the budget on May 24th and ultimately adopt the budget at the June 14th meeting. The governing body does have the ability, should they so desire, to amend the budget that's introduced this evening, depending on the type of amendment and the amount of the amendment. There's different state regulations for doing so, which our borough attorney will guide us through along with our CFO.
Thank you. I think I would just comment that from the finance committee perspective, I think this budget is fairly reasonable considering that our starting point was a much higher implied taxation to our residents. And as a new person to the finance committee and new to looking at the town's budget, I guess I would comment that I believe our town will have some high expenses going forward. We mentioned McCarty Pond, we mentioned Schwenker's Pond. I mentioned the upcoming what I believe will be a recommendation by the Shade Tree Commission to possibly get into a process of replacing the cherry trees at the Haven Road. That doesn't even get to many asks from the different departments heads, our fire department, our police department. I think that one of the things I would like to see, and we're starting to discuss at the finance committee, is a better way to maybe look at our needs as a borough on a multi-year basis. I mean, we do have capital planning for large expenses, but one thing that I think would be great to see would be if we can move to some kind of better multi-year planning or budgeting, such that we are able to put in context a number of these needs and these wants by the different departments, a lot of these projects that we have that are upcoming, and be able to somehow put it into context and make some decisions so that we're not saying, okay, you're not gonna get this year, you're not getting it next year, you're not getting it the year after, but there is a plan for how we're gonna get to that need. And it might not be this year, but it might be on year 3. So I think that is sort of where we would like to try to move. It's not something that can happen in a month, but it's a process that we will be working on in the next 6 to 12 months. And I welcome feedback from council members. But the idea is that, is to find out how we can maybe develop some better views a little bit further out, so we can address many of the needs that I think are coming, and be able to make, keep the costs at a reasonable level while addressing the needs of the town.
Thank you. And later in the agenda, I believe there's a consent item where Councilwoman Neff will be taking over as the lead on the Finance Committee, and I will be her backup, supporting her on the Finance Committee. So congratulations and welcome. Thank you for taking that responsibility. So let's move to personnel. We'll have Councilwoman Christner Keith brief.
We have one update with regard to personnel. We have the appointment of a special officer class 1 on the consent agenda, and we look forward to Mark Ehrlich joining the borough.
Excellent, thank you. Planning and zoning, Councilwoman Koch.
Thank you. The planning board will be meeting on May 18th. The agenda for both the planning board and the zoning board will be posted on the borough website. We are also having a second zoning board meeting this month to get caught up on some of our backlog, and that will be on May 20th. And the agenda will again be posted on the borough website. As far as the rec committee is concerned, you can still go online and sign up for summer camps. And we also have started the installation process for the multi-purpose turf fields in McCarter Park. And it is the intent of the Recreation Committee to have a small ceremony once the turf park is completed to open both the new tot playground that was recently opened as well as the turf field. And that is it. Thank you.
I did want to mention, Council President, we do have Sean McNeil here and David Joy. We've made a lot of improvements in cooperation with the Board of Ed in McCarter Park. And I think if you drive by McCarter Park, you'll see a lot of use in that park. And there was a time when that park was underutilized. And I think a lot of the improvements the borough has done in the last 5 or 6 years, along with what we've worked on with the Board of Ed, has been very successful in that park. And we're very pleased to have a good working relationship with the superintendent, the Board of Education, and the school business administrator.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I agree. Fire, police, OEM, Councilman McHugh.
Thank you, Council President. Good news. Our cases are trending down, like as in most of the country. We have 25 active cases. So about half, I think, from our last meeting. Hopefully that trend continues. And somewhat related, some people were asking, so I'll just put it out to the public. Fire department has postponed their vote on the fair. They're going to wait a month to gather more information and hopefully make a decision whether or not the fair will go on this year. Thank you.
Can you please make that happen? My kids will be very excited if that happens.
Same. Fingers
but
crossed.
we understand the considerations. Thank you. Okay, and I will take engineering, DPW, and Borough facilities. I think we drove most of those into the ground at this point for the last 2 hours, hour 45. One thing I will say, I would like to extend our appreciation to the citizens of this town for their patience with the fish kill that's been going on in the Navasink and the carcasses that are all over our beaches. We were originally advised by the DEP by New Jersey to leave them alone and let them reabsorb. That was causing some tremendous odors, is the best way I could say it. Some of our citizens got together and bagged some of those carcasses. We may see them wash up again. It's not clear if we'll have a second or third or fourth wave of the fish kill. But I also want to thank the Rich and his team, the DPW, for working with the county to get them disposed of, which is no small effort. We were trying to find the right way to properly dispose of them, and those were cleaned up. I want to say last Friday, maybe we cleaned out those bags of dead fish. Rich, I don't know if you want to make any comments, but I just want to say thanks for sort of getting rid of this nuisance for us and keeping us out of hot water with the state.
Yeah, it was late last week. We put together a team from our DPW. They did a beach cleanup at the end of Normandy. We also did the beach at the dock. We checked the boat ramp area, cleaned some of that up, and also the end of the terminus of Hants, but that area was okay. And then, yes, we were able to work with the county for disposal.
Yeah, this problem stinks. Okay, sorry for that. All right, moving on. Introduction of ordinances. We have one here, amend chapter 2 to update junior firefighters auxiliary regulations. Hearing and adoption May 24th meeting. Allison, do we what administratively do we need to do here?
We need a motion to introduce. This was reviewed at our last meeting. The state, as Greg Cannon had reported, changed the regulations to be more uniform. So we're just abiding by that new regulation.
I'd like to call for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Great.
Council members Commissioner Keefe,
Yes.
Koch,
Yes.
McHugh,
Yes.
Neff,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes. And moving on to the consent agenda, resolutions 125 through 139.
Can we ask some questions on that?
Sure.
Motion for discussion on consent agenda
Yeah.
items.
Administratively, Allison, before, do we do discussion before we, do we make a motion on the list of them and then open it for discussion?
Yes.
Usually it's an offer, a second, and then you can go into discussion before roll call.
Great, thank you. So motion? Do I
So
have a
moved.
motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Great. Do we have comments? Councilwoman Neff, you want to start?
Yes, on the last two ones, 2021, 138 and 2021, 139. I read through them. Just wanted, if you can provide a little bit more explanation on exactly what we're doing, approving the proposal for Bicentennial Hall. There's also I think a grant application associated with that. I'm just wondering if that could be discussed a little more. And then the last one also on the applying for the local recreation improvement grant, the bike playground for McCarter Park. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that. Maybe I missed something on prior discussions. Just wondering if a little bit more color could be provided on that one as well.
So, so Rich, I would like for you to tackle 138 and Councilwoman Koch, if you want to tackle 139.
Sure.
So Rich, do you want to start with Bicentennial Hall?
Yeah, so 138 is approving a borough architect's proposal for Bick Hall. We had sent out an RFQ and received the proposal. We also spoke to another architect for the improvements we had spoke about earlier actually in this meeting regarding some of the ADA type improvements to bring that building up to current standards. I know Teresa's got some info as well. You were instrumental with writing that RFQ and reviewing some of that.
Yeah, basically, it wasn't so much of, well, it was an RFQ in so much as that we did write out what the scope of the work was. And we had originally approached the architect, Mark Pavlov, who had done the original drawings back when Bicentennial Hall was first looked at by the governing body years ago. And he is still does historical work. And he initially had, he would give it some thought and get back to us. He was very busy. So I, with the blessing of the Police Committee, I did reach out to Eli Goldstein's firm, who also does preservation work. This is not really a large scope of work right now. Rich Gardella has already done site work, generally speaking, for the parking lot and the ramp that would lead into the building. We're looking for the architect to assist us in the drawings for the ADA compliance on how the ramp will interface with the building. We have to add a second bathroom, and we have to make the dais area ADA compliant if we're going to use that as a public meeting space. We have an opportunity to apply for a community development block grant to assist us in the ADA improvements. That grant application is due by July 23rd in a funding amount up to $200,000. Fairhaven has a very small scope of qualification for community development block grants, unlike other towns. Based on our socioeconomic level, we are only eligible for ADA improvements. We have not had a CDBG grant since 2008, when they used it for some of the improvements in the downtown streets, the original streetscape. And I'm hoping if we work together with Rich Gardella and with Eli Goldstein's office, we'll be able to put together a grant application that may bring us some funding over and above the money that the governing body had already authorized for Bicentennial Hall to pay for a good portion of these ADA improvements. The original architect, Mark Pavlik, did get back to Rich Gardella and told him as much as he'd like to work with Rich again and likes Bicentennial Hall, he just didn't have the bandwidth to give us a proposal at this time from being so busy. So this is on tonight so we can get moving forward in hoping that we, July 23rd seems like a long ways away, but it really isn't when you're coming about putting together a grant application. And I'm really hoping we can submit an application that may get at least some funding for those ADA improvements.
So I just wasn't clear. What is the 6,750 we paying for? We paying for Eli to help us apply for the grant? I just wasn't clear what we are paying, what exactly we are approving.
The scope of work is actually behind the resolution.
Okay.
Let me grab it for you. And I'll read it right off of the that I actually put out there. The scope of work that was originally put out that I had in the RFQ, demolition of the existing ramp system, construction of a new barrier-free ramp system to coordinate with new parking area to be constructed by the borough, construction of a new barrier-free lavatory and alterations to an existing lavatory as may be required in the Uniform Construction Code, construction of barrier-free dais to accommodate members of the governing body, board members, and professionals, construction of a vestibule for energy conservation purposes, improvements to address acoustical issues, audio-visual, and improvements to existing structure resulting from new work. The first 4 tabs of that would be grant related and would be time sensitive to be submitted for the CDBG grant.
Okay.
This is normal for us to have professionals draw up specs for a project of this sort. You could draw a corollary or an analogy to my time on the Shade Tree Commission when we needed to submit things to the state. We hired a consultant who understood canopy and maintenance and so forth as it relates to forestry in the state. And so filing these things properly helps us get potentially helps us get the $200,000. And so in my estimation, this is and the work that that I've personally been involved with Eli, his firm's top notch, and really does understand our community at this point.
No, thank you. I just wanted to clarify exactly what we were approving, but that's clear to me now. Thank you.
Yeah. Shall we move to?
I have one quick question.
Sure.
Council.
Go ahead. On this topic, right? On 138? Okay.
No. On 129?
We, Lilini, Councilwoman Neff had 2 questions. Betsy was Councilwoman Koch was gonna answer the other question, and then we can move on to you, sir. One moment. Over to you, Councilwoman Koch.
Yes, so on the consent agenda 2021-139, which authorizes the submission of fiscal year 2021, which is a local recreation improvement grant. This is a grant funded by the state. It is on tonight's agenda because there is a deadline for the end of May. When the Recreation Committee established their 5-year plan, one of the projects that they sought to undertake is the building of a bike playground in McCarter Park. It would be approximately 3,000 square feet, and it will help to build on our Safe Routes to Schools initiative. There would be some cost associated with in Fairhaven for the borough. However, that cost will depend upon the size that we inevitably, that we will inevitably settle upon. So DJ, with the support of the Recreation Committee, asked Teresa for permission to write up the grant. We put it on the consent resolution for this evening, and hopefully we will approve it, and DJ will have the grant out by the end of May, and we should find out by July whether or not we will be able to participate in this grant.
I just wanted to add one thing on that regarding the bike track. I don't know, or the bike playground. Lilini or Councilwoman Neff, have you ever seen images of this? I don't know if they were included in the council packet. I don't know if
They are, they should be in, they're in the, if you go to consent agenda resolution 2021-139, there's a packet there, and on the back pages of the packet are pictures of the proposed bike trail. You should have it.
It has a pictures of the park, but I don't know if I know what the bike,
what it is.
It's there.
I'm not
It's
sure,
there.
okay, I see something back here. I still don't fully understand what it is, but
Do I have permission to share screen? Because if I do, I can pull this up really quick. Hang on. I won't screw it up like last time, I promise. Tell me if you can see this. Can you see that?
okay.
So this is the idea. It would be enclosed within the park and is, striped and has certain directional such as stop, or you can see there's parking spaces for bikes and scooters, but it's contained within the park. It would be a nice opportunity for new bikers to kind of learn the rules of the road, that sort of thing. Perhaps there's additional programming that could be incorporated either from the borough or the Board of Ed. So that's just kind of an example or a replica of what a bike playground looks like.
Thank you very much. That nothing speaks like a picture.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And would the expectation be that this would be fully funded by the grant, or would we have to pay additional funds if beyond the grant amount that we are applying for?
There would be possibly some additional funding required depending upon the size of the grant. We're looking for a $43,000 grant and the size, the final size of the bike playground. So there's a couple of options that we have.
And I'll just add that the picture you're looking at says community fields, but I believe that the grant and proposed location is McCarter Park. So
It
ignore
is.
that, please. Yeah.
Correct.
Great.
Great. So with that, Councilman McHugh, you had questions on 129?
Sure. For Mr. McNeil for being so patient and joining us. I have a quick question for him. If he's available. How you doing, Mr. McNeil?
Very well, Mike.
Awesome. So from the joint statement regarding the research, including the borough's active transportation plan, and then it states that there was a Sickle School parking and traffic study completed. I was wondering if you could just kind of walk us through from that traffic study, the findings, to how ultimately the professionals came to conclude that this is the best idea.
Surely. And first of all, Council, it's nice to see you all tonight in Fairhaven. It's nice to spend this fine Monday evening with you all. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys. I actually have my business administrator, David Joy, as well as our engineer from from Bowler, James Theon, who's been on with us as well. So I'm actually going to ask them to pipe in as well here. And I offered James a thank you for being patient with us for 2 hours tonight. I offered to hydro rake the nearest pond to his house tonight as a thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for being with us.
So before I turn it over to them, just a general statement, Teresa, thank you for the kind words that you said earlier. The feeling is mutual. We do appreciate and enjoy a wonderful working relationship with the borough, Chief McGovern as well. Everything that we've been trying to do on this referendum has been to try to make this place better, even greater than it already is. And as the Willow Street project became something that we wanted to talk about in the referendum, and those of you that came to our presentations, it was something that we talked about from the get-go with this project. We knew, at least our understanding was, we were working with some pretty limited space, obviously, on Willow Street. There's only so much real estate there. Conversations with Teresa and the borough regarding what might be developable from the standpoint of Willow and into McCarter Park, and trying to understand what we could do to make that an improved situation. There are some things we've done operationally to try to improve arrival and drop off and safety there. We've opened the doors to the building earlier to allow student flow to start into the building so that folks aren't congested at the beginning of the building earlier. We've also put additional staff on duty to try to start the drop off process a little bit earlier on Willow Street. So there were some things operationally that we've done to try to improve that flow. But ultimately it became down to an opportunity to do some significant improvements to Willow Street. So we did engage Mazer, one of our firms, to do a parking and traffic study in the area of Willow Street. And Mr. Joy, if I can kind of turn it to you for what the general findings of that study were, and then I'll kind of pick it up from there as to what the next phases were.
Sure, no, I'd be happy to. Their conclusion, and not very surprising, was that more parking was needed. They did their study, I guess, for Willow Street and the surrounding area. They found that there were 70 parking spots along Willow Street, as well as 7 in the back of Sickle School, so 77 spots. And those spots were filled pretty much every day. And they did talk about, they did a study of pedestrian traffic as well as bicycle traffic and car traffic. They realized that car traffic goes up when the weather is not as nice, when it's a rainy day or a snowy day. Obviously, the car traffic increases. So I think one of the things they talked about was that more parking was needed. They talked about the idea that angled parking, if we were to angle the parking on a one-way street, it would help, in terms of flow, in terms of in and out on a busy street with a couple different, pedestrian crossings on it. They talked about having a designated drop-off and pickup area that would help out as well. So not that surprising, but it was good to see, and we saw those numbers, and it was helpful to get a good base anyway to start out with.
Great, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Joy. So as we were working within the confines of what we understood to be developable, again, something that we could develop over there on Willow Street, we did engage. I did have some feedback. There was one resident who was pretty proactive in reaching out and wanted to see if there were some other thoughts that we could do to perhaps do something that might be a better solution over there at Willow. So we did in good faith explore that. We wanted to make sure that we did get the parking that did come out of that recommendation from Mazer in any solution that we came up with. We have about 65 or so staff members that come to the campus every day. That's before you include any type of parents or anybody else arriving. But as we explored that with the borough, it was pretty clear that the only options for us to develop were going to be on the Willow Street side of that post and beam fencing. So the grassy area where the spots kind of already are, but then there's quite a bit of grass that has not yet been developed for parking right there. So without us being able to have a meaningful option to develop any land, and we know that the park is beloved. So even if we had permission to go in there, it's a very serious decision to make a decision to potentially pave more or how invasive to the park any of us would be willing to be. But in good faith, we did want to explore that. But from my perspective, I wanted to be very careful not to invest any taxpayer dollars in a plan that could not be entertained. In other words, if I don't have the land or the permission of the land to develop it, in good faith, I can't invest a lot of money exploring options that really are non-starters from the perspective of the borough or anybody who owns the land. So once it became clear that we were not going to be able to develop any land further into Willow, we did move forward with trying to put together the best plan with the space that we did have to work within, which is Willow Street and including that grassy area on the post and beam on the Willow Street side of the post and beam fencing. In picking up those additional spots, part of the plan is also to eliminate some of the parallel parking that is on the school side of Willow Street to start a more dedicated drop-off lane. So again, we can start that drop-off process even earlier on Willow Street, which we do think will improve the situation. Rich Gardella had some good thoughts on looking at it about the curbing and the sidewalk. Those of you that have littles that come to Sickles, you make that walk quite a bit. The sidewalks there are fairly narrow, especially as you kind of go over to the Fairhaven Road end of Willow Street. So the project also includes improving that area and widening the sidewalks there. Rich, did you have any thoughts on that piece of it? I know that was something that was near and dear to the borough's heart as well.
Yeah, that pretty much covers it. And obviously looking at the PED crossing at Fairhaven Road, having one dedicated crosswalk to a proper ADA ramp on the west side of Fairhaven Road to control that intersection. And then obviously widening the sidewalk along the restaurant will also narrow the distance that the crossing is on Willow Street. And recognizing that we put in the new sidewalk along Fairhaven Road on that one side, it is being utilized and there is a pretty good amount of PED flow that comes through there. So tying all that together, the efforts that the borough and the Board of Ed have made, through this project and prior projects, also looking at the fact that we put in new curbs and sidewalks in front of all the residential properties from Oak Place to the school, the improvements that the school is doing on their frontage with some restoration and sidewalk improvements and utilities and drainage, and kind of tying this project all together as one whole piece. So that's all incorporated into that scope of work.
Perfect. And James, I'll ask you to pipe in for a moment as well, if you don't mind. But one of the things, Mike, that was also discussed was potentially, if we can't really encroach any further upon the McCarter Park property, could we perhaps go into the apron at Sickles where the landing is, where the flagpole isn't there? And again, from our professionals design perspective, they were not comfortable doing that. I have asked them for some details on zoning and code as to what is typically recommended for public schools. But from a design perspective and our level of comfortability, again, those of you that have been there, as is, that area is quite packed each day at dismissal, certainly. The students are younger, so the parents are not as comfortable for the most part with students just kind of making their way to them at other parts of Fairhaven Road or other parts of the area. So it is quite common for quite a few parents to descend upon the campus. As it is, we have a few people that will step down from the curb into Willow Street, which is something that we don't love, but it's already occurring. And we were not comfortable bringing that process, any vehicular traffic, any closer to the Sickles front door than already currently exists. Sickles is also a little bit landlocked with regard to the number of entrances that we use. We use more entrances at Knollwood. The students are a little bit older, so they're able to kind of dismiss a little bit more developmentally appropriately on their own. There aren't folks typically congregating, waiting for our older children from Knollwood. So at Sickles, we really have the main entrance and the side entrance. And once we have the new addition, we'll have another spot for the students to come and go from as well. But you are still limited there with regard to how many folks can fit in a standard space. That's pre-COVID, let alone with trying to, socially distance, descending upon the campus there. So it also creates issues too. You have the Nauvoo property there. So even if we were to encroach further in closer to Sickles, you would have to bow back out as you come up on the Nauvoo parking lot, which could create some issues from our perspective with regard to how that could affect traffic flow. James, did you have any comments? I know you were issued a pretty tight space within which to work, and I know that we've talked to you a little bit about what some other options might be, but it seemed like short of having permission to go any further to the park, this was our best option.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with your assessment. I wouldn't feel comfortable bringing the drive aisle closer to the front door of that building than it currently exists today. I like the idea of the space that's provided there to provide room for children and for parents to get their children safely into and out of the school. And I don't like the idea of having a drive aisle that cuts up. If you kind of watch my screen, kind of goes in a wavy motion towards the school and then back out around the Nauvoo property. I think that the routing of the street as it is today works well. And I think as a best foot forward here, the idea of adding a drop off along the existing curb line, but modifying some of the parallel parking spaces that exist there to accommodate a drop off operation happening a little bit earlier is a nice way of mitigating some of those concerns. But I would not recommend going further to closer to the school than currently exists today.
Thank you, sir.
Can may I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
So I was at Sickles today, and in the last few days, I've noticed that there are a number of trucks, large trucks, I guess, from the people, from the construction, who are right now parking on that lawn right against, the chain link fence.
Mhm.
Are the parking spaces gonna go as far as the chain link fence or a little bit further in? Because one thing I noticed is that those trucks barely fit right now. The ends of the trucks are almost towards the street, and if you back it out, you have to go really far into the street to back out. It just struck me as possibly a safety issue, because now we're talking about parking spots much closer to the crossing area. And as you mentioned, some of the parents actually are right on Willow Street and end up walking on the street, as they are waiting for their kids.
Yep.
That was one question I had.
So, and I can let James chime in on this again too, but basically what we're looking at is the spots that are, as you approach the crosswalk, obviously we have more room to put spots closer to the crosswalk on that side, as the cars will be backing out away from the crosswalk. So we would expect all of our ARPED traffic to be coming either on McCarter or on the sidewalk on Willow Street on the school side. So one of the thoughts in having the 45-degree angled spaces is that it puts cars in a reverse motion for a shorter period of time than if they were in a 90-degree parking space. So hopefully they'd be able to pull out and be in reverse a little bit less, and then be able to move forward. And then obviously where we're going to be cognizant is on the other side of the crosswalk, where cars would be backing up towards the crosswalk. James's design allows for enough room for cars to back out safely without coming into close proximity of that crosswalk. James, does that sum that up fairly well?
It does, and Councilwoman, it sounds like you're also referring to some of the larger vehicles that are there due to construction activity. So unfortunately, construction is a reality that we all have to deal with, and it provides some inconveniences, but it is a temporary situation. So by providing the 45-degree spaces there, and actually by adding more of them, in my opinion, it actually acts as further traffic calming measures for the street by adding more spaces there, because it forces drivers to be on alert for a larger distance, especially in front of the school. Because if you imagine yourself in a parking area or in a parking lot where you're looking for a space, when you're seeing those spaces, you're slowing down because you recognize that people can be walking across. So today, where there's actually just that green open space along the frontage of the school there, that doesn't happen, right? It actually can speed you up through that corridor because you have a larger view shed. So by adding more parking spaces there, I actually like it to calm down the cars that are traveling through that area to promote further safety.
A little bit further on that, I think in the last council meeting, it was our understanding that those parking spaces that are going to be closer to the school, essentially where the lawn currently exists, would be for staff members from the school. And I just wanted to confirm whether that's going to be the case, because part of my concern is that I can understand your point on the additional parking spaces, people possibly paying more attention, I'm not sure. But I am fairly concerned about cars backing up while the kids are in and, getting into the school or getting out of the school. It just seems to me that that center area of parking, if it was meant to be for staff, it should then not be, we should not be seeing cars backing out of there. In and out, and parents should know they should not park there, so that we avoid any situations in which we have a lot of people backing up back and forth while there are parents on the street, kids trying to cross, and then particularly those 2 or 3 spots right after the crossing, on the way to Fairhaven Road. I don't even believe those spots should exist personally, unless there are serious restrictions on being able to back out of there when the kids are not there. So I think that, I think there are a lot of benefits to the plan. I'm just concerned from a safety perspective in terms of having cars backing out, and in particularly in that section right after the crossing. I would be very concerned if that's an open space for any parent to park there.
No, I think you're making excellent points. We share your concerns. So that would be staff parking. So the expectation would be those vehicles would be safely parked before anybody is descending upon the campus for arrival. And those cars would still be there for at least 15, 20 minutes after dismissal occurs. So that would be primarily staff parking. And again, on the parallel side, we would eliminate a few of those spots and create a loading zone, which would be really mainly for arrival. It could be, we do have families who pop in real quick. They forgot something, they need to pick up homework, drop off a lunch. I know we all remember everything all the time, but it happens more than you like to think. The loading zone could be used for that sort of thing. So we won't have parents having to park very far away for that sort of a quick situation during the school day. But those spaces would be for staff so that those spots would be static, but at arrival and dismissal.
I have some piggyback questions on some of these. Is there a visual available that we can review?
We do have a visual. Rich, do you have the copy of that?
I don't have it at my disposal right now. James, do you have it where you can bring it up?
Sure. Yeah, I have an iteration of it that I can bring up. It's not the latest and greatest. We're getting updated survey, but I think it paints a picture for the most part of what we're doing here.
Okay, that would be helpful. Yeah, if we could take a look at that while we're discussing it. One of my questions relates to handicap designated parking spots. Oh, we just lost the screen share.
Coming back your way right now. Here we go.
Has a provision been made for handicap designated spots?
That is actually part of our charge, is to make the handicap spaces better than they currently exist today. They're approximately where my mouse hand is, a little bit of a further distance from the school, and there's really no practical reason why they're there. So we're actually going to look to do is locate them a little bit closer to the crosswalk. And what that actually ends up doing is helping or mitigating the amount of traffic in and out of those spaces that you typically see, because they aren't typically highly accessed spaces when you see in the grand scheme of things compared to a non-ADA space. So we're going to be locating them a little bit closer to the existing crosswalk.
Yeah, can you expand the visual a little bit more? Just a little difficult to see. That's helpful.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess my request or concern or consideration would be that handicap spaces that are not being utilized invite an opportunity for a parent to pull in, idle, I don't know, help someone tie their shoe or whatever it might be and pull back out. I think that's exactly what Councilwoman Neff is concerned about. So I think a really thoughtful consideration of the location of those handicap spaces is really important. And while I'm not suggesting that, parents in town will do that, invariably it happens from time to time, or you need another couple minutes with your child for whatever reason. So I think that's an important point and should be considered when you're designing it, the location of those parking spots.
Are there usually police officers at drop off? I believe there are, and I find it unlikely that people would take that liberty if there was an officer there, but that's really a Sean question.
We are very fortunate. Chief McGovern does an incredible job. We have an officer on site just about every single morning, barring their need to respond to an accident or something else. But it is something that we enjoy just about 100% of the time.
Okay, thanks.
And I guess one of my secondary questions is, you mentioned a loading zone. Can you kind of describe where that would be and how it's different than the current conditions?
So it'll be approximately located where my mouse hand is now, where there's this magenta rectangle on the plans. And essentially it's going to be different than it currently is today, because as you can see, if I really zoom in here, this area is striped for parallel parking spaces. So there's a number of parallel parking spaces that are up and down in front of the elementary school. So what we'll be looking to do is to lose a few of the spaces on either side of the crosswalk there in order to provide a loading area.
And how will that function for such as a morning drop off?
Mm-hmm. So we have, hopefully if you guys have seen, we do a little bit of the valet rolling drop off, where we have a number of staff members on duty who we've really been trying to discourage parents from, having to get out of their car and assist their little ones in coming out. We kind of have that little valet door service that we do. So the idea would be if they're not striped parking spaces, there's less likelihood that you are going to pull over into a spot and kind of spend a little bit more time, dilly-dally a little bit. If we have it marked off as a loading zone, and then from our operational perspective, we would make sure we had enough staff out there to start that drop-off process a little bit even earlier. So actually probably a little bit further down than the current magenta box on the screen, to try to really have that rolling drop-off happen more consistently a little bit earlier on Willow. The goal being to really not have as much backup at the end of Oak and Willow where that occurs. This is about a 10-minute process for us, 12, 15-minute tops that we try to move through as safely and swiftly as possible. And we feel like if we really mark that off and not really invite a car to sit there and idle, that would be kind of a designated loading zone that we could kind of more efficiently and more effectively enforce. And a lot of this comes down to behavioral patterns. So this was a change that we did see a good improvement on about 5 years ago without making any actual changes to the striping or anything. It was just basically something that Mrs. Cuddy actually put into place when she was principal here to really start to try to just enlist the staff to help us get this process going. The other piece that sounds like a little thing, but we in our last collective bargaining agreement, we agreed to have the teachers on duty 5 minutes earlier, which actually allows us to open the doors 5 minutes earlier, which may not sound like a lot, but when you're talking about a 10, 12-minute arrival process, the fact that kids don't have to congregate on that apron allows parents to more comfortably drive away, because their child is getting out of the car and going in the building, pretty much that entire 10-minute window. So we feel like the combination of designating that drop-off loading zone area with those additional operational pieces, including a few extra staff members on duty if necessary, to start that process even a little bit earlier on Willow, we think that certainly the situation will be improved.
And how many cars can fit in that magenta loading zone area?
It'll be approximately 6 vehicles.
Okay, and is the idea that if you are not in the box, you should not be opening doors and letting children out?
That would be the idea. Obviously, that's going to come down to, people are going to do what people do sometimes, and we understand that. And there's nothing I can do from stopping someone from pulling up at one of the, parallel spots that are further up. But that's part of what we're going to explore with James when we take a look at everything from the ADA spaces to how many spaces we're gaining via the development of that grassy area versus how many we're going to lose on the parallel side. We did have that key number that we were hoping to get to on parking spaces. So there is a possibility that we could expand that loading zone a little bit further. But that would be the idea, that you would be dropping off within the loading zone. And if not, your car should hopefully be moving on.
Okay, so there's a portion of the existing sidewalk that will, if this plan comes to fruition, will be part of the loading zone.
Correct. So you think about some sort of yellow indication that this is, and again, if somebody's coming real quick to come up to the door, we wanted to call it a loading zone as well, because I don't want someone to have to park, in one of the very far parking spaces to come up to the door, to drop something off. During the school hours, there could be an opportunity for that to be, a legit loading zone.
And then will there be a egress lane around the loading zone for people behind the loading area that are finished dropping off or need to pass through?
So James, we have the one right of way pass through the main flow of traffic area there. I don't believe that we have any design beyond that.
No, yeah, there will not be an additional striping here. It is still a public street and it will function as such. So you'll just see, as Mr. McNeil said, there's going to be just a striped out loading zone on the curb side of the street. And then beyond that, it'll just be your normal blacktop pavement.
Right. No, I'm sorry. I didn't ask a very good question. I'm thinking in the context of drop off. You have 6 cars in the loading zone. You have the parking spaces filled. I've already dropped my child off, but I have not yet approached the loading zone. Can I pass through, assuming nobody's in the crosswalk and there's no stop sign up, can I pass through the street?
Yes, we would trust our crossing guards, Mr. Henry, Mr. Booth, and all that to continue to facilitate that behavioral traffic pattern that we've been doing.
Okay. And this increases the number of parking spots from 77 to what?
What was the final number, James?
We're looking at getting around additional 22 parking spaces.
So up to 99.
So that's about it's about 99 parking spaces or so. But once we do our grading and our drainage design, that could tweak plus or minus a few spaces there.
Okay. And is the existing fence, will that have to come down in order to accommodate the angled parking?
No, at this point in time, we're planning on keeping the existing fence line as it exists today.
And will the bike parking be relocated, or is that TBD?
That's TBD. That's obviously very near and dear to our hearts. So we're going to look at kind of where these things settle. I would very much like that on the school side of the property. That's our #1 goal for obvious reasons. So we actually worked out pretty well with the temporary situation that we've done with Mrs. Schwartz has them marked by grade level. So we're going to look at a combination of over by the new addition as well as in the front of the school. We're looking to see how the new office entrance kind of develops, and we're actually also looking at some outdoor class space. So once we kind of have some final designs on that, we'll make that, that final decision. But we love our bikes in Fairhaven, and we want to do right by the Littles having a really safe place to park those. And we envision that being on the actual school property on the school side.
Can I ask why? I'm just curious about that.
I like it from a safety perspective. We control that property. So when the students are here at school, I do like the fact that the school bikes are on school property, just from a liability perspective and understanding, what's kind of coming and going. We do know the crossing guards do a really great job. The officer that's typically there, the students are, as soon as they start crossing the crosswalk over with Nancy from Fairhaven Road, they're all prompted to walk their bikes. So we haven't had any issues with students on bikes coming into that heavily crowded area. They seem to do a really great job with it. And knowing that they have those behavioral patterns in check. And by the way, I think the bike playground looks like a really neat thing that we would love to get involved in and utilize. And from our bike programming, that seemed like a really great thing. But we would anticipate having it on the, there's not a lot we would do with the amount of frontage that we have at Sickles. It's, it's pretty close to the curb as it is. So we want to make it beautiful, but we think that we can incorporate the bikes in a way that makes me feel comfortable having them on the actual school property. We do have kind of folks at large at times in McCarter. Again, out of respect for McCarter Park, I wouldn't want to look to put a ton of bike racks in the park if we can facilitate them, safely and hopefully in a way that's cute and fun over on the school side.
Sure. No, I'm just asking for my own curiosity, because when I rode my bike to Sickles, it was over in McCarter Park.
Yeah, I like having it there, but it's there's probably no wrong answer. But I like when it's on our property when they're with us, and then we have good control of it.
Sure. I realize time is an important consideration on this, and the goal is to kind of address this prior to the beginning of school on, I think it's September 13th. I'm interested in the studies that were conducted. They haven't been shared with the governing body at this point. And I'm also interested in a little bit more, I appreciate these plans, but this is the first time I've really gotten really significant amount of detail in them. And I understand that, the shared services agreement is proposing to push this out as soon as, for bid, as soon as, I don't know, tomorrow possibly. I guess I'm just curious how we can receive that information, because it seems that we would have to have these plans drawn up in a little bit more detail prior to any sort of bid. Is that right?
Yes. So James, as far as the bid process, but David also, I know with regard to our studies and what we've communicated with the borough, any information that we owe them that we need to get to their hands?
No, not that I know of. I mean, they have the parking study, so I'd be happy to share that again. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. And then my other question, and Teresa, you may have an answer to this, or Mr. Joy, the sharing equally of the cost between the borough and the Board of Ed 50/50, how was that arrived at?
Just general looked at cost estimates and looking at the scope of the work, we felt that it pretty much impacted a fair balance of what would traditionally be considered borough work for a road project and what would be considered work that was associated with improvements that went along with the school, whether in combined work in looking at drainage and everything that went into the project. We both absorbed the cost of our own professionals. Obviously, the Board of Ed's paying for James's time. We're paying for Rich's time, and it looked, as opposed to just trying to measure out every square inch and saying it's Board of Ed versus the borough. In the general spirit of cooperation, we thought that the 50/50 split was fair to both sides.
Okay. And in terms of drainage, what is our additional drains going in on Willow Street, or what's the
I'm gonna
drainage
let
plan?
Rich or James speak to what, Rich can at least start out with the drainage improvements that are contemplated for part of this project.
Yeah, sure. As part of the Sickles project, They're adding some drainage to tie in the roof runoff from the school, and they're going to be tying into our system, which eventually flows out to Fairhaven Road. So as part of this project, the scope would include upgrading those existing drain lines, which have got to be 70+ years old. Basically from the westerly driveway of Sickles out to Fairhaven Road, and then also taking care of the one catch basin at the Nauvoo apron, the one that's really sunk into Fairhaven Road there, reconstructing that and tying that in appropriately. I don't know, James, if you have anything else. I know you were looking at, you know, how it integrates into our system.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head on how we're handling things from the Sickle School to the west towards Fairhaven. I would just add, we're also going to be adding the additional pipe that would be required at Willow Street and Oak Place.
Yes.
On that side of the street as well. We're going to be adding some additional pipes there.
Yeah, when we did, there's existing catch basins at Oak and Willow that aren't tied into anything. They're sump drains, so they're always full of water. And when we did Willow Street Phase 1, we ran pipe up to that intersection with the intent to tie it in as part of this. This is really a Phase 2 of that prior project. Yeah.
That makes sense. And then I also didn't see it. Someone mentioned it earlier, cost estimate. Do we have, is there a cost estimate for the project?
It's
Yeah,
in the, okay, go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I had prepared an estimate, a detailed estimate based on all the items from our concept design. And we had estimated that to, Teresa, you put 225?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a total cost.
Total cost. That would be curb,
share 50.
sidewalk, drainage, additional parking, milling, paving, brand new street from Oak to Fairhaven Road, and also incorporating the intersection at Fairhaven Road.
Does that include
Willow.
striping as well?
Yes, striping, crosswalks, signage. It includes all of that.
Have you guys considered and rejected speed humps or speed bumps just to keep the traffic under control, considering the type of traffic we're seeing on that street?
You know, it's something you always look at, but speed bumps, in my experience, actually have somewhat of an adverse effect sometimes, where when you approach a speed bump, you roll over it slowly, and then the driver will speed up to make up for that seconds that they lost. It's also an issue when we're picking up brush and leaves, snow plowing, things of that nature.
Yeah.
And they do degrade and become a maintenance issue. So
And they do
we
impact
are
first responders.
we are necking down the width at Fairhaven Road and Willow from the curb line of Fairhaven Road all the way up to the driveway apron of the school. So that'll, you know, narrowing the roadway will also add to the traffic calming. And then to James's point earlier, when he spoke about the view shed of the parking that's added, you know, I agree. That will also, just from a driver's perspective, slow you down as you're heading, you know, west on Willow Street.
Thank you.
Mhm.
May I just ask, sorry, another question, and you know, just thinking through it, I'm over there dropping off my daughter almost every day. There's a lot of cars, you know, like there's a lot of cars parked on Oak Street, Oak Place, and further back on Willow Street, you know, like on between Oak and Camp. So if the added parking is for the staff, mostly for the staff of the school, where does the staff park right now? Are they the ones parking at Oak Place and further back on Willow, or are those parents? Because I guess what I'm trying to understand is whether are we alleviating the traffic and the parking related to the parents picking up children, or are we still stuck with that problem?
Mhm.
Because, sometimes there's double parking on Willow Street because you stop the car and run to get your child and get back in the car. And it seems to be backed up quite a bit, and almost seems to me like, unfortunately, that's not getting resolved as a problem.
So we do have, without taking a head count as to exactly who's parking where, we are aware of a number of staff members who do end up parking off-site. And when I say off-site, I mean whether it's the Borough lot, Fairwinds Deli, farther down Willow, Oak Street. We theoretically should have just enough spots right there, but that is not how it pragmatically manifests. Whether you have a neighborhood resident park overnight in a couple of the spots or whatever might occur there, that's what we're, when the study was done by Mazer, one of the things they were hoping to accomplish is that, the building with that level of capacity for the professionals that are coming, they want to see X number of spots to allow for that, so that there's not a need for people to park on the street with regard to going to their daily work. So the thought process between gaining the 99 spots is that we would absolutely have a spot on site for all of our staff members and then some. So that if there is additional need for people to come to the building, whether it's substitutes, whether it's other professionals, whatever it might be, that should be alleviated. But I am aware that there are a number of staff members who do find themselves parking. You'll see some of them parking down by the corner over by Lupo and walking across the street and coming up from there as well. They might just be taking a walk down by the water for all I know, getting to work about an hour early, but I suspect that there are quite a few folks parking off site, which is a shame. And I'm hopeful that that would create less of a need for those, because that does have an impact. From my perspective, being there most mornings, any on-street parking will, does have an impact, whether it's, creating a little bit, someone doesn't park as close to the curb as they should have, whatever it might be. It does seem to create an impact there. So our hope is by offering the appropriate number of spaces for that building's capacity, that some of that would be alleviated. Certainly it's not all staff members, but we are aware of a number of staff members who do park off campus.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, I suspect that you may still have a problem with the parking for the parents. It doesn't seem to me like there's enough parking there for parents dropping off or picking up their kids. So you're addressing the parking, on the side streets somewhat by creating an allocated area for the staff. But I suspect we're gonna still have very busy roads, and I hope that, I don't think there's a complete solution because Willow Street is so narrow.
Right.
And because of the location of the school, but I hope that one thing that we can keep doing is really encourage people to bike to school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless it's extremely cold or raining.
Yep.
Encouraging the kids to bike to school is so good for their health, and at the same time, maybe try to alleviate some of that, of the traffic issue.
I agree. I agree with you completely. I think I was pleasantly surprised and to see how many students were continuing to bike during the construction. I know that a lot of folks, a lot of us, myself included, had a lot of butterflies and nerves regarding the school essentially being a construction site, this school year. And we've still seen quite a few students coming in on their bikes. I do suspect that's impacted how many parents are comfortable letting their kids ride their bikes because of the amount of activity that we have going on right there next to our school. So I'm hopeful that we'll see an uptick in that bike traffic again, although it seems pretty good when you look at the bike racks, but I agree with you. And pickup is a little, definitely more parking intensive than drop off. Drop off is a little bit more of a flow. Pickup, people are parking and coming to the school to wait for their little ones to come out. That's kind of the crux. And Ms. Neff, you hit the nail on the head. Short of us having more real estate to develop, there are only so many solutions with regard to what we can do in that area. So that was kind of our conundrum, was that we're dealing with this very limited space, and if we can only go up to the post and beam fencing, we completely respect that. What's the best we can do there? And we knew if we have staff that are parking off site, we've got a parking issue. So our hope is that certainly this will be improved. It's not a grand parking solution, at the front of the building, but working within the confines within which we have, this was the best plan that the professionals, put forth to hopefully make an improved situation for everybody. Everything from the stormwater down to the arrival and the parking piece that we think will all be markedly improved as a result.
And I definitely appreciate that. And I think it is important to address parking.
Mm-hmm.
But I would just say that, I guess I've already said it, but I think what makes Fairhaven special is that we can bike to schools in Fairhaven. And I think placing emphasis on that and where the bike racks are gonna go, maybe placing bike racks on the park side as well. So there's that option that you can go through the park and cross over the park biking and park on the other side, but really placing that emphasis, because I think that is why our town is so special.
Agree.
And, you know, it's another way of alleviating the traffic. And I think we should keep our focus on continuing to encourage that for both the parents and the kids.
I will do that. And you'll be happy to know I just bought a brand new matte black beach cruiser for transition day so that I can model good bike behavior with our little guys. But I agree with you. It's incredible. It's no place. It's like nothing I've ever seen when I came here. It still surprises me. 5 years in.
Special, so.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent, and our professionals. So do we have any other questions from the council on 128 and 129? Sorry, 129, 130, sorry.
No other questions. I would just ask that we continue to be updated with regard to the studies and more detailed plans as we move forward, and bids are received, that sort of thing, before we authorize them.
Excellent.
Sure. Yeah, and just want to thank you because like that study, well, we weren't privy to that, but Mr. McNeil and with your associates, I think you walked us through the rationale, you identified the problem, and you walked us through the solution. So I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
I heard you, Councilwoman Koch, say thank you.
I did, but I was muted. Sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. McNeil.
I miss you, Mrs. Koch. You are very welcome, my friend.
I miss you too.
Any other questions on the consent agenda from the council?
I would just like to make one comment. I know that I motioned for approval for the consent agenda, but in terms of item 128, introducing the 2021 municipal budget, I would just like to express some concerns over the capital spending. It seems to have increased over last year. And I know we're going to see an increase in both with education from RFH, from Knollwood School, as well as I don't know what the changes are going to be from the county, but I would like to thank the Finance Committee for all their hard work, along with Mrs. Casagrande and Colleen Lake. But I would just like to express my concerns over some of the items included in capital spending. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of things to note as well, but I guess, I share in Councilwoman Koch's concerns of increased spending. I guess the question would be whether or not there are any opportunities to either make a budget amendment or address some of that increased spending and where the opportunity to cut. I know the borough administrator works very hard to, take into consideration all the municipal requests and then gives everybody the bad news of what they can't have or what doesn't fit in the budget and cut. But, I guess, Teresa, if you could give sort of an overview of the budget process year to date that has gone through this year. And I know that this was addressed at the prior meeting, but just to see, if you believe that there's further opportunity to address any reductions.
As far as the budget process went, as you know, I, for the first time, shared the budget in its rawest form with the full governing body in a meeting several meetings ago, which had us, in a large increase just based on the request of every department head. I think we were sitting about 14%. Then off of that meeting, I did not get any direct feedback from individual council members as far as where they would like to see cuts, although I did work with the Finance Committee to make my recommendations for where we could cut appropriations, which is spending. And Colleen Lapp worked very hard on the revenue side of the budget and on the as far as what we would do with capital spending, which has not increased this year. We held the line in the same 215 that we have always allotted for capital spending. As far as that goes, we did put some additional in for the pay down of debt, which was earmarked for debt that has been authorized but not issued yet. As far as, where you would want to go with this budget, if you wanted to make an amendment to it, personally, I don't see, unless council members, have a particular line that they think that has been not addressed when we did our initial rounds of cuts. I think your only maneuverability in this budget, if you want to bring the $15.03 a month on the average home at 889,000, would be to either use more surplus or to reduce what you're going to spend down in debt service. I think both of those options, although they might seem appealing now, I think you'll find next year or the year after that you'll see a jump from when debt service picks up, and or you don't have surplus. You have to remember, surplus is a revenue in the budget annually. We try very hard not to use any more surplus than we regenerated the year before. And we were lucky this year. Our revenues didn't take a big hit as we thought they would on COVID. But I do think that I do think if you use either one of those two options, it will you'll see it impact you in what you can and cannot do in the next couple of years down the road to keep the tax rate relatively steady. So like I said, I have not heard directly from individual council members. You certainly can share any input you have or thoughts you have with the finance committee, Councilwoman Neff and Councilman Rodriguez, or certainly through my office, and I will take direction from that process.
And does oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks. I was just going to ask, the surplus is increased this year over last year. Is that accurate?
We did have a pretty good return this year on surplus, and we were pleased with that. You'll see the numbers that we have held steady or tried to hold steady. And I don't have any way of envisioning what may or may not happen in this upcoming year. We thought we would, like I said, see a little more reduction in revenues. That hasn't happened. Next year, we do have, we're just getting out the monies from the federal government when it came to COVID relief. That was only released today. Large towns got their numbers allotted, but smaller towns like Fairhaven will have to go through the county. So we don't know exactly what's going to be coming our way. There was some thought that some towns might be able to utilize some of that money as part of their budget introduction or to reduce this year's tax rate. I do not know as of today if that's going to be possible for the smaller towns that don't have their monies allocated directly. For example, Jersey City or Middletown, there's already a published format. I think Middletown's getting $6.5 million. And they very well may be able to utilize some of that money now that they have the number today for tax relief in this year. I don't know as of today whether or not that's an option for Fairhaven, but if it would become an option, as this thing rolls out in the next week or so, we get more guidance from DLGS, I certainly would inform the Finance Committee and the full governing body if that might be the case.
I had a follow-up question to one from Councilwoman Christner Keefe, which has to do with our credit worthiness or our credit rating, making cuts or not making cuts. Can you just touch on how that impacts our credit rating?
Several things impact your credit rating. Councilwoman Neff could probably go on and on about it because she has a lot of experience here. But one of them certainly is your surplus level. And one of them is the amount of total debt service or total debt that you're looking to authorize. So when we had our last review by Standard & Poor's, we did have a very good debt ratio, and we had a very good healthy level of surplus. And that, I believe, two of the driving factors when you read the report that kept us at our AA+ credit rating were tied to that. So, you know, those are things that save a lot of money over time when you go to issue debt, because the higher the credit rating, the better bond, bids you're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, I would just mention that, we just need to keep in mind, we are likely issuing debt, soon to help us with some of the construction projects. And to the degree that we have that in mind, we should probably not change some of those ratios in terms of surplus and coverage ratios. I think maybe, I'm not against looking at further cuts between now and the adoption of the budget. And potentially having some kind of an amendment, but I would just suggest that we might not want to touch those areas because they may be important, and in terms of our profile and what we can get as a coupon rate when we are trying to issue a bond. So that would be one suggestion. The other thing I would mention, and I did mention that earlier today, I really think Fairhaven will have some substantial costs going forward. We are a small town with some very large fixed costs. And I think we all going to have to really sit down, and I mean all of us at the council level, and think through where the areas we need to work on and how we're going to prioritize what we want to pay for in the next year or two or three, so that we can keep our costs at a reasonable level. I actually think I would suggest that the 5% that we have come up with is actually quite reasonable compared to where we started. Not to say that I would not like it to see it much lower, but I think it's going to be an ongoing problem, and we need to just keep that in mind. But I'm open for further consideration of cuts between now and the adoption if the council would like to discuss that.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say, I've kind of been through this 4 or 5 times now. It's if you keep these numbers at a flat total increase, rather than incrementally raising them each year, you end up having a snapback situation, and we have an opportunity to ease out of that issue, which has been built up over the years. So I would be, personally, I'd be reluctant to make too many cuts, because then we're just mortgaging the future on the folks that are going to live here in a year or 2 or 5. So I think a smooth rolling forward of this budget is really going to serve us well, as opposed to try to slash it with the condition of our streets and the conditions of our sidewalks and our curbs and some of the infrastructure that we're talking about replacing that are at end of life. But that's just my view. There's 6 views on the council, and we're all we're all allowed to have our opinions here. So I want to say thanks to Sean and his team. I think we've concluded the discussion of the Board of Ed, and that we had public comments on agenda items. So the public's already commented there. So I just wanted to say thanks for joining us and participating as panelists.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Chris.
guys.
Thank you, council. We appreciate you.
Yep. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Council President, if I could just raise one more item related to the budget.
Sure.
One of the things that has recently become apparent to me, both as a vice liaison to the rec committee and throughout this budget process, is that there are certain elements within municipal finance that are not necessarily provided for in a budget. So for example, capital spending typically happens either out of the allotted capital that we put build into the budget. I believe we call it something like revolving capital or something like that. And then we bond for a lot of it. And one of the things that I've realized is that there is no, I'll call it discretionary spending for lack of a better term, but discretionary spending within the rec for rec purposes specifically. And rec is a little bit of a outlier because it's not like the police department where we know uniforms have a useful life, or police cars have a useful life, or we know the tanks at the firehouse are going to expire after certain dates. So there's the needs and wants of the rec committee or the rec initiatives are a little bit more, I don't know, not concrete. And so without any sort of discretionary spending, which we don't necessarily need to build into a budget, is what I've learned. But without that sort of commitment, you get into this kind of chicken and the egg scenario where the rec committee wants to pursue initiatives. How much is it going to cost? Do we have any money? Now we have to go ask for it. Versus the concept of them, the rec committee being able to make recommendations for spending of a floor of an amount of money, for example. So I think that's an important consideration. And I heard Councilwoman Neff say earlier, and I know she's been working on the finance committee with coming up with capital plans out of all of the departments. I think it's a really important initiative. It gives the governing body and the borough employees direction on whether they're involved in committees or budgeting or whatever it might be, direction on what the intentions of the committees and the governing body are moving forward. And of course, we can't predetermine what any governing body will approve, but it at least gives a vision. And so I think that initiative is really important. I want to thank her for working with the finance committee on that. And, I look forward to those capital spending plans and ideas coming forth to the governing body so that we can consider them and kind of give more meaning behind the future of Fairhaven. So I just wanted to make a note on that as it relates to what invariably is one of the most important documents that we talk about and work on, which is the budget.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the instituting a 3 or 5 year outlook or plan for each department or each committee or commission is going to be beneficial. I know a lot of other towns do that. This is I do this at work. These are the kinds of things that I think Councilwoman Neff is going to spearhead as well, and would definitely entertain that for sure with regard to rec and every department and committee and commission.
Absolutely.
So, we do have a ongoing, capital improvement plan that we've shared with past governing bodies that has looked out 3 to 5 years. And we generally separate it into small ticket capital, which is, less than $100,000, which annually they would appropriate money from our pay-as-you-go capital program, which they're very successful. And then your larger ticket capital, which would be what we put in our bond authorizations annually. And we do them annually sometime in the summer, and we'll be doing that process again for both small and large capital expenditures.
Yeah, if I could just ask one last kind of general question. Maybe Teresa, you could take this one, kind of piggybacking off what I think Councilwoman Neff was bringing up about some of our fixed expenses. Our appropriations, a lot of our interlocals seem to be increasing on a gradual percentage, but some of them seem to pop out quite alarming. One thing, I guess I'll start with the good. The appropriations for the DPW with Rumson, last year we appropriated $50,000. This year we're not appropriating anything.
Well, that's because the way it's set up, when we eliminated brush grinding with Rumson, it comes 2 ways. We have to appropriate what we're going to spend on brush grinding in the budget, and then it's offset by what we collect from Rumson on a revenue side. So what you're seeing is a reduction in the appropriation, Mike, but you're also seeing a corresponding reduction in the revenue side that was not also anticipated.
Yep. Okay, great. So I pointed that out. So thanks for pointing that out. I wasn't sure what that was going to. And then if I can just bring up some of the alarming increases. Well, this was not so alarming. Why is our court system going from our interlocal court from 60 to 68.5, an 8,500 increase? Is that just for using their building? they're raising the rent?
No, it
proverbially?
actually, there's backup spreadsheets that go to that, Mike, which I'll happily send you tomorrow, but we actually look at what we actually spent the year before, because it's an ongoing, we budget, but we're not necessarily sure of what we're actually going to spend. So we make an adjustment every year based on, workload and what was spent before. And I'll make myself a note now to send you the backup spreadsheets for the court interlocal.
That's actually fine. I think the rationale, I could maybe reasonably suspect that the backlog in the courts this year and an increased usage there. But I thought that was a fixed sum, no, part of it interlocal, just like we charge.
No, it's actually rolling annually. I mean, people get raises, increase. I mean, there's different factors that go into it. And then it does fall back to what we actually spent the prior year, and we make an adjustment. And it'll be clearer when I send you the spreadsheet, Mike. You'll be able to follow it over, year to year. It'll be easier to send.
Okay, and then one other, other big red flags is the RFH BOE custodial services. That's part of the interlocal, I assume. That's going up.
Yes, that's going out to bid this year, Mike. And they're actually gonna put Fairhaven's workload into the bid, so we get a better feel for what that actual cost is. And like we said before, we've gone from, we have multiple buildings in the borough that we have custodial services for. And as we use them more and more, whether it's Bicentennial Hall or whether it's the concession stand or, the community center, PD, all of which have to be serviced. And that's really our only custodial service that we have available.
Okay, and then technology services is almost
Technology
doubling.
service, I believe we spoke about this when we first talked about the budget. I did increase that this year, mainly tied to a couple of situations. We had I shared with the finance committee, and I can certainly send to the full governing body. We had a audit from our JIF when it came to cyber technology, and there were I'm sure I said to the full governing body, there were many areas. It was a green where you're fully compliant, yellow where you're somewhat compliant, and red where you need to make changes. And we need to do a lot of upgrades to technology and security. We also have been prompted by our residents, and certainly the governing body has been supportive of the fact that we're looking to go to some more tech savvy, time saving mechanisms for both our public in the forms of, in the form of getting things online and getting forms online. So and bringing in some technology in our zoning office and our construction office that allows them to have a much more automated process. We did bid for, it's one thing to bid for the hardware and software on that, but our tech team has to be able to implement it. So I had to have more time, more money allotted for them.
Okay, great. And personally, as a resident, someone just going through the zoning process and the paperwork, I could definitely get behind an automated electronic submission type streamlined form. So I appreciate that. And then the last thing, kind of shiny object, if you could explain the Township of Middletown Financial Services, $100,000. That nice big round number kind of sticks out.
That was several reasons behind that. Obviously, one of them is we had some personnel changes this year that were not anticipated last, except when they happened early in the year. One of them was we lost Jen Johnson, who was slated to become our QPA. And another one, of course, was we lost our assistant CFO for a period of time here. So we had to spend more on the QPA interlocal, which we discussed as a full governing body, to cover us for hopefully anticipating only this year. And then some other services that we had to rely on Middletown to provide for us when we were shorthanded. So that was the driving factor. We hope our new assistant CFO that we hire, we hope to be able to bring QPA back in house in January 2022, hopefully.
Thus bring that kind of
Yeah.
down. And last thing, and that, forgive me, maybe we could talk offline of this, but the unfunded ordinance two from 2018 and one from 2019, are we essentially, we're funding
That's the $400,000 that we set up in the deferred charges, and ultimately the CFO has reserved that money to pay down those two ordinances. We've already authorized that debt, but it has not been funded. So that money's sitting in there in a placeholder to pay down those ordinances as listed in the budget doc. So she won't have to issue additional debt for those. It's a placeholder for debt coming online next year, and it's paying down debt that's been authorized but not funded.
Okay, thank you. That was a big help. Appreciate that. No further questions.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments or questions? And if not, we'll move to vote on the consent agenda. Allison?
Council members Krishna Keefe,
Yes.
Koch,
Yes.
McHugh,
Yes.
Neff,
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes. Department reports, municipal clerk, dog license, tax collector, and budget status.
Motion to accept.
Motion to accept. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, go to the borough. Motion open.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So for motion, it's getting late. It's after 10. Please identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. And please observe a 3-minute time limit. Thank you. Do we have any hands?
Please raise your hand.
Megan's raising her hand.
I see one. Councilwoman Krishna Keefe, you're up.
Two quick items, Megan Krishna Keefe, 25 Beechwood Place. I would like to thank everybody who showed up for the Fairhaven Natural Area volunteer days, pulled some vines, moved some big logs out of the way. And if you came for 1 hour or both days all day, it's appreciated. We thank our DPW staff who came out and are continuing to work on clearing out the piles. So if you've been there recently, you've seen the piles. They might be gone by now. My other comment was related to agendas, council agendas, the times on which we receive them, the number of council meetings. I'm sure some of my fellow council members have heard my, I don't want to frame it as a complaint, of my desire to receive council agendas and supporting documents further in advance that we currently do, to provide us with a greater opportunity to review, digest, and ask any questions that we might have prior to council meetings. And not that we can't ask all of these questions at the meeting, but as you know, does not give us an opportunity to digest that feedback that we might receive and make these very important decisions. So I would just ask that since we're all here tonight, my council members, fellow council members, think about what amount of time would feel more comfortable to receive agendas and packets and information, as well as if, and I don't know if this is something that other municipalities do, or if there's some sort of rule or law or policy on it, if there's an opportunity to spread meetings out to perhaps every 3 weeks, for example, and just have more robust meetings so that the effort and work that goes into putting together the council agendas and packets is less frequent, but more in depth or more agenda items per meeting. So just some considerations that have been on my mind, and it's been a concern of mine for a while now, because receiving, the agendas as soon as 3 days prior to a council meeting can be extremely difficult we all lead very busy lives, and I think everything on the agenda deserves proper review. So just wanted to share that and ask that everybody kind of think about it to see if there's some opportunity for any adjustments or changes.
Thank you. I think we do have one other hand up.
Yes, I believe it's Ruth. Ruth, I'm going to go ask you to unmute yourself so you can speak again.
Okay. To get back to what I did out of turn, last meeting, we had discussed the people putting brush and leaves out at the curb, out of their scheduled dates or whatever. And I had said that I've seen it done habitually by others. The landscapers pay absolutely no attention to the schedule. And another resident had backed me up saying he had talked to a neighbor whose landscaper had told them, doesn't matter what the borough schedules, it's not his schedule. So I think we have a few different alternatives here. One is to contact the owner and reiterate what their schedule is, have them talk to the landscaper. If it is not on the landscaper's schedule, then maybe the landscaper should be responsible for taking it away with them when the piles of leaves, the piles of brush or whatever that are out of schedule. The other thing, if it's a repeat violation, the landscapers do register with the town. We could take away their permit. I think that would upset the homeowners, but I think we might get some action when there are consequences. Or we can scrap the ordinance. Because it seems to me that the DPW has two ordinances which are virtually dependent on circumstances outside their control. One is Mother Nature. And when the leaves fall and when things grow, they are trying to whip Mother Nature and the residents into their schedule when it should be the reverse. We are paying them to get it organized on their end because they're the ultimate end source of getting rid of this stuff. Now, Little Silver last year scrapped their brush pickup ordinance, and I'm wondering if anybody has heard anything from over there about how that is working out. Because being a realtor, I don't notice that the number of homes sold in Little Silver has gone down because there's piles of brush in the street. It's just beyond. And the other incident of fighting Mother Nature is your snow removal pickup or plowing. You have put the residents in a untenable position of you've got to have your sidewalk shoveled. These are the people who have sidewalks. Or you get some kind of a summons or a warning. However, you're not allowed to put it in the street. So what are you supposed to do with it? There's just sometimes no place to put it. And I think you're just flying in the face of circumstances beyond your control. And I don't think the residents should be penalized. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Much appreciated. We will absolutely take those under advisement.
I would like to address that comment, at least to a degree.
Which one?
The one on the brush. Actually, also, I want to get to Councilwoman Krishna Keefe as well, but first on the issue of brush grinding. I do think we need to reconsider what policy we want to apply. I think I'm not clear if we have a first warning, a second warning, and then there is a fine. But I would suggest that it's not an effective strategy. There is brush and leaves everywhere on the streets. You walk, I live on Fairhaven Road. It's always around here, but I know it's elsewhere in town. It looks awful. I think we need to find a more effective way to address this. Either we have the brush grinding and a pickup schedule, and we have fines that are effective, or we come up with something else or another way to approach it. But I just find that whatever we're doing is not working, and the schedule is not being followed. So
Yeah,
I really think that needs to be on the agenda for us at some point soon.
Yeah, one thing I'd say is that this year for spring cleanup, we issued a number of warnings. And the purpose of issuing those warnings was to take the, we just, we just briefed on the brush grinding, either the last meeting or the meeting before that. So we're taking the survey results into account. I will say changes in government don't happen overnight. Changes in business don't happen overnight. You need time to issue the warnings. You need time to change the behaviors. I think that Rich and Joe Muley and the team are taking the considerations that we put on the table to heart and enforcing using warnings. We are taking strides so that people can learn what the schedule is without being too heavy-handed. In the past, we weren't issuing as many warnings or any violations. I don't know that we've ever issued a violation for snow shoveling, which is one of the comments that was made earlier, at least in the decade that I've lived in this town. And it may be that we want to do that, but I don't think whipping the lever from one side to the other is very good. I think giving people a chance to learn the schedule and understand that warnings will turn into fines based on what we learned in the survey. And so I do think that we are taking it seriously. And I would urge people to be patient and see that it works. If it's not working, then we'll do something else. But I don't think it's going to happen overnight. We need to give people a chance to change their behaviors, not just the people putting it out there. I did see a lot of people pick up their debris and just put it 2 feet into their property. That worked out great. There were probably hundreds of people that had done that, and I saw them do it personally. So I do think that the warnings did work actually, where we didn't have to go and fine everybody. But it does take a bit of time, and I think that we just, if it's the decision of the 6 council members that we want to really kick their teeth in and make them pay, that's a decision we can make. I just think that's a bit, it's a bit much while we're trying to respond to that survey, those survey results that we just got in. Rich, do you want to respond?
I think in the many years that we've been doing this, I think we've seen a pretty good turnaround with, the education efforts, giving the warnings. And although it seems like there's a lot of piles of brush out there when they shouldn't be there, we do spot check, especially like when we just finished Zone A last week. We had pretty good compliance. In last year's numbers, based on what I was looking at, we had like 95% compliance. As the season went on, people were learning, okay, I better not put my stuff out. In fact, we actually get residents that call up and let us know that a neighbor down the street put out brush, when we just came through. So they're kind of self-educating as well. It's not all the policing through us, through code enforcement, in my department. The same thing with separation of the leaves and the brush. We've seen a great improvement with that, where we used to see a lot of mixed yard waste, where now we're seeing the piles of leaves early in the season and the brush separated. So that assists us. And also with the stormwater management piece, not piling the stuff on a storm drain or near a storm drain. And I even know in years past, the stuff would pile out into the center line of a road and PD would call us and we'd have to pick up emergency piles. I think we've seen a lot less of that as well. So once again, to Councilman Rodriguez's point, we do have a survey with fairly new results. We are still continuing to go through that. And, there's little tweaks and adjustments that we can make as we go. But I think for the most part, our staff is out there picking up the piles based on the zone. And we are talking to the landscapers and we are talking to the residents.
And Rich, I know that your staff is out there and I know you're doing that. You're definitely doing that. I do hope that the educational effort works. I guess my only point is that if people feel that there's warning number one, warning number two, and they'll never get a fine, it's less likely to be ultimately effective. But I hope it does become effective if we are onto it, and we can give it some time. And I guess I would just mention that the brush is still out there, and if it never becomes a fine, and people eventually, or landscapers eventually figure out it never turns into a fine, maybe ultimately, it will not be fully effective. But I'm happy to give it time. I'm just saying, I'm still seeing the brush out there. But I do know your team is there, and I know you're going around and doing that, and thank you for that.
Joe Muley issued a few summonses because those residents were at Borough Hall's front door, not so happy that they got a summons after they got 2 warnings, and questioning the survey, and is this what residents really want? And Betty Ann, I have to say, handled it really well, and the gentleman, he understood. He also felt that, he pays taxes and he should put it out at any other time, but he did understand when she explained why there's the schedule, and, with our limited DPW doing multiple jobs, not just out there doing brush and leaves, they kind of backed down and understood. So,
Yeah, and to a certain degree, I think that the $50 or the $75 that we charge as the fine, people are like, fine, I'll pay the bill, big deal, moving on. And they put it out there. It's revenue, but it also is a nuisance, and it's I mean, those are the kinds of things we're dealing with. There's not a lot of them. There's a few, but those are, that we were able to identify them.
Thank you. Now, if I may address Councilwoman Krishna Keefe's comment on the frequency of meetings. Maybe that's not for discussion at this moment, but I just wanted to say that I have looked at some boroughs that are, in similar size to us and that are right around us. There seems to be some flexibility in terms of frequency of meetings. I've noticed some boroughs, they have meetings that are twice a month in the beginning of the year. Then when it gets closer to June, July, August, and September, it seems to slow down and then go back to twice a month. So maybe because it's budget season in the beginning of the year and there are other things to do. But but there's probably some flexibility if we want to reconsider some of our frequency of our meetings to give it more time to prepare for the agenda and have more robust discussions. So I just wanted to address that at least as far as I've seen.
We do spread the meetings out over the summer at the governing body's request. You do set the meeting schedule annually, and certainly we can put it on the agenda earlier this year if you so desire to want to take a look at it for the upcoming year with the idea that you may want to change it. You also have some governing bodies that actually have a separate workshop meeting that don't incorporate it into their regular agenda, which you could certainly consider if you so desire. We'll certainly accommodate any schedule of meetings that the governing body wants to hold, keeping in mind that we do have to pay bills in a timely manner, and we can't. There's a laws that don't allow us to hold back on the payment of bills. So that's very important. And that's one of the important things you do at every meeting is that you approve a business.
I think that's a very important point. If I may, I just wanted to say one last thing. The Girl Scouts planted 10 trees in the natural area on Arbor Day. Initially, the weather seemed to be awful, but the winds stopped just for 1 hour, just enough time for the 6 troops to get in there and plant the trees. We thought we were going to have to cancel the event, but we went forward. I just want to say it was a really neat project. It was really wonderful to see the girls do that. Now they are on a watering schedule. They have to water the trees over the next 6 weeks. That's not a small project per se. It's 3 gallons of water per tree every other day or something like that. So it's not a small commitment. We are looking into possibly expanding that and inviting the Boy Scouts to participate into this project next year. So there may be more to come, but I just wanted to say kudos for the Girl Scouts for having done this. Was a really nice project.
So where did you plant them? Were those along ridge in the buffer there?
Yes, the majority of them were in that buffer area where we have that, walk, the area where you walk and you can see Ridge Road.
Yep.
The natural area committee is trying to buffer that zone. They
Yeah.
already had some young trees that have been planted there for that purpose. So we essentially added to that buffer. The idea being hopefully these trees will grow, will survive, and will help us, buffer against Ridge Road.
That's great. Thank you for spearheading that. I know that came, I think, originally from Benny Coleman and sort of boomeranged around, and Councilwoman Neff spearheaded that. And I want to say thank you. That is a fantastic addition, and no yawning, Councilwoman Christopher Keefe, please. I'm sorry, I'm boring you. Just kidding. We have now reached 10:30.
Mrs. Blazer has her hand up.
Oh no, who?
Ruth Blazer.
I think she's
Go ahead and
already,
unmute yourself, Ruth.
I think she's already had her 3 minutes, but if it's brief, we'll allow it.
And she might have it. Go ahead, Ruth.
Are we okay? You didn't finish the last part of what I said about the leaves and brush. Another thing not taken into consideration is the weather. I do my own yard work, and the weather the last week has been on and off raining, so that I have not had the opportunity to get out and finish my yard work. But they came at 8 o'clock this morning and took my brush from the curb, which means I don't get another bite of the apple until the second week in June. And it's just become overwhelming. There has got to be some kind of a caveat for weather. I mean, you cannot expect people to go out and work in the yard in the rain, especially with electrical equipment. So throw that one on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. I was only kidding.
Tina has her hand up. Go ahead, Tina. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, I know it's 10:30. I'm just going to second Mrs. Blazer's comments because I'm another one that does our leaves in the fall and in the spring. And, it is difficult to work around Mother Nature and our schedule for pickup. And, it could be a month before out there, to the curb. So, fortunately I've been, I've been able to put them like in another bin or whatever to store them if I, can, but sometimes you just can't, you can't get there. And, once a month pickup also isn't very helpful to that. So anyway, I just wanted to second her opinion. Sorry.
Thank you, Tina.
And good night.
I was only kidding. I was just joking with Ruth there.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Thank you very much. Going once? Anybody else? Going twice? I see no hands.
I'll just add one thing as
Mike,
Rich added.
there he goes.
Here we go. Let's go to 10:45. Maybe preaching to the choir, but let's get it out there. When we work on take our leaves and brush out, just try to be cognizant of the plastic, if any, in there, and try to get that out of there as that gets ground up and put into the ground. So if you have plastic in your piles, know that gets ground up and goes out to a farm, and we don't want that stuff in the ground. So try to clean it up if you see anything. That's it.
Good reminder. Thank you. Okay. I do not see any more hands. And I'm going to do one last call around here. Any comments? And if none, motion to close.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
That concludes our meeting. We are going to go into executive session. Will not take action. I believe we turn off our cameras and we turn off our microphones and we move to executive session.
What do we need?
Told Mike or Bet there, well, Mike or Betsy. There you go. Mike made it.
Here you go.
Motion to close.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for all your time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.